LoveLore Library. Chapter 54. Qin Yining did not know what the person beside her was thinking. She focused on praying and stood up. At the same time, a sweet female voice came from outside the hall. "Yes, I still remember your heroic appearance. Returning here again, I am filled with emotions." Qin Yining was stunned. Before she could react, Peng Xiao grabbed her hand and quickly went around the shrine, hiding behind the statue of Lady Mother of the Chariot. Qin Yining was at a loss for words. She was about to cry out in surprise, but her mouth was forcefully covered. Her waist was also wrapped around by an iron arm. Her entire body was leaning into an unfamiliar embrace. Her cheeks suddenly burned. Qin Yining saw that Tang Meng was also brought over by the attendant in the same way. She was somewhat anxious. At this moment, the door of the hall creaked open and closed. The female voice laughed and said, "Your Majesty, look, this place is still the same as before." What answered her was an old male voice, "Yes, I was fortunate enough to be here in the past. When I saw the statue, I felt that the statue was dignified, but there was also a hint of charm. I immediately felt happy and could not help but take a few more glances. Who knew that when I left the mountain gate of Lady Immortal Temple and went down the mountain, I would meet you who was going up the mountain." There was the sound of clothes rustling, and the woman gasping in surprise. "Euro, I thought at that time that the heavens already knew what I was thinking and specially sent a goddess to my side to relieve my pain of yearning. I am just a willow. How can I be called a goddess? It is just that your Majesty is the Emperor, so it is true that the heavens are looking after you. This time, Lady Immortal Lu gave you the elixir of immortality. After you used it, you became even more energetic." The woman's voice was very charming. Then, there was the sound of a man's happy laughter and the sound of water. Qin Yining blushed as she listened. She peeked through a small gap at the foot of the statue and saw a young woman being held in the arms of a tall man in his 60s with gray hair on his temples. Their lips and teeth were intertwined, and they were kissing passionately. Qin Yining had never seen such a scene before. His face flushed red. He quickly turned around and bumped into the man behind him. The unfamiliar man's scent lingered around her nose. His breath was mixed with the smell of incense and candles. There was also an unfamiliar scent unique to men and a faint smell of grass. It was not unpleasant, but it forcefully and overbearingly forced its way into her breath. When she looked up, she realized that the young master was not looking at her. Instead, his handsome face was tense as he observed the scene outside through the gaps in the altar. He was so serious and nervous that Qin Yining calmed down a lot. Hearing the conversation between the two people outside, she already knew who they were. It was hard to imagine that the Emperor and the Demon Empress had such a past. The Emperor was so muddle-headed that he could even think of doing such things in front of the statue of progenitor Dumu. However, this was far from enough. What the Emperor and the Empress did next even broke Qin Yining's three views. They actually took off half of their clothes on the praying mat and had sex with her. The woman's moans and the man's deep breathing, as well as the sound of their collisions, entered Qin Yining's ears. Qin Yining wished she could find a hole to hide in. She could only cover her ears and close her eyes to avoid this embarrassing scene. In her heart, she was cursing the Demon Empress and the fatuous Emperor thousands of times. Peng Xiao lowered his head and looked at the woman who wanted to bury her face in his arms. A gentle smile appeared on his lips. However, when his gaze met the two people outside, a thought flashed through his mind. If he wanted to kill the muddle-headed Emperor of the Dian now, it would be as easy as flipping his hand. However, after quickly calculating the gains and losses, he extinguished the thought of killing him now. The muddle-headed Emperor would bring more benefits to the Dezhou if he was alive. The lovemaking soon stopped. The woman praised the Emperor's bravery tenderly. The two of them were intimate for a while before tidying up their clothes and leaving hand in hand. It was not until the door of the hall was closed and the outside was quiet that Qin Yining regained her senses and hurriedly withdrew from the young man's embrace. Tang Meng was also blushing. She ran to Qin Yining's side. Her big eyes were misty and she looked like she was about to cry. Qin Yining held Tang Meng's hand. He did not dare to look at the strange young master who was standing there for a long time. He turned and fled. Tang Meng pulled Qin Yining to a secluded corner and hid behind a big tree. Their faces were red and they did not know what to say for a moment. After a while, Tang Meng gritted her teeth and said, "The muddle-headed demon empress is so absurd. I think that muddle-headed emperor has the face of a fallen country. The demon empress is so tenacious that she caused my entire family to pay with their lives. Why is the heavens so blind to send down a bolt of lightning to kill her?" As Tang Meng spoke, tears welled up in her eyes. Qin Yining frantically wiped away her tears. At this time, she felt that any words of comfort were useless. No matter how many words she said, how could they compare to the pain that the destruction of her family brought to Tang Meng? She looked carefree, but in her heart, she was hiding her pain. Qin Yining comforted her for a long time. When he saw that Tang Meng gradually stopped crying, he said, "I know you are sad, but in this life, everyone has to go through all kinds of ups and downs. It is useless to look back on the past and regret. Life has to go on, and people have to look forward. In the future, you will be by my side. We will be a family. I will not leave you alone. In the end, we can be companions." Tang Meng was so touched by Qin Yining's sincere words that she wanted to cry again. She sniffled and forced a smile. "Miss, I know you have the best heart." Qin Yining smiled and tidied up Tang Meng's hair. He said, "But I am afraid you will have to change your name in the future. Ruelan, too. You can discuss it with Ruelan in the next 2 days. I am not very educated, and I can't think of a good name. You can think of a name that you like. I will discuss it with Sister Ruelan later. As for me, it is even easier." Tang Meng rolled her big eyes and smiled. "I will be called Bing Tang." "Bing Tang." Qin Yining laughed. "Good, this name suits you. You are a sweet girl. If you are called Bing Tang in the future, your life will be sweet." "Yes, it will be sweet. And Bing Tang looks good and tastes good. Isn't it great?" They looked at each other and smiled. They both felt relieved. Qin Yining said, "Let's go down the mountain so that old madam won't be worried. When we see old madam later, don't say anything. Just pretend that nothing happened today." "Okay, I know what to do." The two of them tidied each other up for a while, and only then did they descend the mountain. When they reached the foot of the mountain, they saw Mama Bao looking up. When she saw Qin Yining and Tang Meng coming back happily hand in hand, Mama Bao felt relieved. She said, "Miss, you are back. Get in the carriage and warm up." "Sorry to trouble you, Mama Bao. Grandmother must be worried. I followed Miss Tang around the monastery and was delayed for a while." As they spoke, they came to the front of the carriage. Qin Yining and Tang Meng stepped onto the red wooden stool and got into the carriage. Seeing Duchess Ding sitting in the middle with a gentle smile, Qin Yining picked a light topic and talked about some of the scenery he saw in the temple. When the topic came to an end, Duchess Ding asked gently, "Did you meet anyone in the temple?" Qin Yining's heart jumped, but his expression didn't change. He smiled and said, "No, I just saw a young madam in the distance. I didn't meet her face to face." Hearing this, Duchess Ding nodded. She thought for a bit and glanced at Tang Meng. In the end, she didn't say anything. Qin Yining understood that grandmother might have met the Empress and recognized her identity. She wanted to take advantage of this moment to tell her that the Empress had come. However, she was afraid that this topic would hurt Tang Meng's heart, so she swallowed the matter of the Empress. However, grandmother wouldn't know what an awkward matter had just happened in the hall. She had also heard the Emperor and Empress's conversation, mentioning that the Emperor was eating the elixir that Fairy Lu had made. Thinking about it, the past emperors had all sought the method of immortality, and the Qinglong Emperor was no exception. However, she was surprised that a Philistine like Fairy Lu would be proficient in the art of making elixirs. This person was truly unfathomable. At least, Qin Yining couldn't tell whether Fairy Lu was truly Philistine or pretending. He couldn't tell how wide her connections were and whether the skills she was proficient in were real or just a bluff. The carriage first sent Tang Meng back to the cloud stepping in. Duchess Ding then ordered people to send Qin Yining back to his manor. After Qin Yining said goodbye to Duchess Ding, he didn't immediately return home. Instead, he went to the Zhong manor to find Master Zhong and ordered him to send 1,600 liang of silver to Fairy Lu Temple. When Master Zhong heard such a large sum, he said in surprise, "That old Taoist priestess is so greedy." He felt a bit guilty. After all, it was he who had begged and allowed Qin Yining to take care of Tang Meng's matter. He hadn't thought that going to King Ning's manor to ask for Tang Meng would be risky and that he would have to pay such a large sum of silver to return to the secular world. Qin Yining said with a smile, "Money is earned to be used. As long as I make sure that every sum of money is spent on the right path, it's fine. Miss Tang is a living person, and she may not be unworthy of the money. Besides, in Duchess Ding's words, it's also for my own good. Miss Tang is magnanimous and kind. In the future, she will definitely be rewarded." Master Zhong listened to the orders and went to make arrangements. He then personally escorted Qin Yining back to his manor. By the time he arrived in front of the family Qin house, the sky was already dark. It was almost time for the key to be dropped. Qin Yining took the oil wall carriage to the second gate and then went directly to Zixiao Garden. Mammy Qin was whispering to Ji Xiang in the corridor. Seeing Qin Yining come back, both of them smiled and came forward to salute. "Fourth Miss Tang, you're back. Madame Dowager was just talking about you. She was worried that it would be unsafe on the road and was afraid that something would delay you. It's my fault for making Madame Dowager worry about me. Has Madame Dowager rested?" "Not yet. Miss, please come in." Mammy Qin personally led Qin Yining into the room. She helped her take off her cloak and then went inside to reply. After getting Madame Dowager's permission, Qin Yining smiled and went into the inner room. She saluted and said, "Madame Dowager, granddaughter is back. It was not easy to walk on the road, so I was delayed for a while. It's my fault for making Madame Dowager worry about me." Madame Dowager was wearing a dark green jacket. She sat cross-legged on the bed and smoked a pipe. After taking 2 puffs of the pipe, she said, "What can happen when you go out with your grandmother? It's my fault for worrying about you. Did you go smoothly today?" Everything went smoothly. Qin Yining deliberately ignored the jealousy in Madame Dowager's words. She asked with concern, "Madame Dowager, did you eat dinner? Did it taste good?" Madame Dowager knocked on the pipe and sighed, "I didn't like it. How could I eat?" Chapter 55. Mammy Qin first glanced at her master to make sure that the old madam didn't have any objections. Then, she smiled and invited Qin Yining to the side. She whispered, "Today, because of what Mama Bao said when she came to take you out, Miss Huining and First Madam got into a fight. Both of them have their own reasons and are very angry. Now, First Madam is crying sadly in Xingning Garden, and Miss Huining is also very wronged here." The old madam comforted one and comforted the other. She was caught in the middle and was in a dilemma. She didn't even have much dinner today. At this point, Mammy Chin sighed again. Mama Bao is also too much. She humiliated Miss Huining in public. Miss Huining is thin-skinned. How can she bear it? If Miss Huining makes a scene, it will be the old madam who will be sad. She was criticizing Duchess Ding. In fact, if Qin Yining was sensible, she wouldn't have made a scene even if Mama Bao humiliated her. This was clearly family Qin. She didn't teach her children well and blamed others for it. Could it be that if one wanted to reflect their children's family education, they shouldn't put in effort when teaching them? Who could force their children to never encounter any trouble? Mammy Chin said this because they were in different positions and each had their own master. A son didn't speak of his father's mistakes. Qin Yining didn't want to speak of her elder's faults, and she was even more unwilling to speak of her mistakes behind her back. She could only frown worriedly. The old madam is in spring and autumn. She needs to take good care of her health. If she doesn't eat a meal, her heart will be filled with anger. How can her body bear it? Qin Yining went to the old madam worriedly. Old madam, I know your difficulties today. I don't study much, but I know one sentence. She picked up a white porcelain cup with a lid that was still warm. Inside was the cow's milk and swallow's nest that Mammy Chin had ordered people to send over. She sent a spoonful of swallow's nest to old madam's mouth. Your children and grandchildren will have their own blessings. You only need to worry about your health. Our family will have a stabilizing force. My father, second uncles, third uncles, and my cousins are working hard outside, so they don't have to worry about the matters of the inner residence. With you in charge of our family, we also have a pillar of support. Qin Yining's big watery eyes revealed admiration and a smile. With such a gentle coaxing, old madam's heart softened. Originally, she didn't have any appetite, but now, she cooperated and opened her mouth to take a few spoonfuls. Mammy Chin laughed when she saw this. She immediately went to get a handkerchief and warm water to rinse her mouth and waited at the side. You are the head of our family. Your health doesn't only belong to you. It also belongs to our family. Not only do you have to take care of your health for yourself, you also have to take care of your health for the whole family. Let's not talk about others, but your granddaughter has just returned home. She doesn't know anything. In the future, there will be a lot of things for you to teach. Qin Yining's voice was soft and gentle, which made old madam's heart feel warm. Unknowingly, she saw the bottom of the cup of cow's milk and swallow's nest. Mammy Chin sensibly came to serve old madam to rinse her mouth and wipe her mouth. She smiled and said, "Fourth young lady is right. Your children and grandchildren will have their own blessings. You are the old ancestor and the head of the family. There are some things that you should just turn a blind eye to. It's fine if you see half of it and not see half of it. Why make things difficult for yourself? When you were young, you worked hard for this family. Now that you are the head of the family, you have a smooth career and bring honor to your ancestors. It's the time for you to enjoy your life. Why don't you treat yourself well?" Perhaps it was because her mood had improved after eating something, or perhaps it was because Qin Yining's words had worked. Old madam, who had been depressed for the whole afternoon, finally showed a sincere smile. She sighed and said, "Forget it. You are all right." When Mammy Chin saw old madam like this, her admiration for Qin Yining increased a little. She couldn't help but speak up for Qin Yining. In this servant's opinion, fourth young lady really resembles the grand preceptor when he was young. Do you still remember that when you were sick that year, the grand preceptor was only 10 years old? He stayed by your bedside and served you medicine without sleeping or resting. At that time, no matter how this servant persuaded the grand preceptor, he refused to go back. He insisted on staying by your side. In the early morning, he couldn't help but lie on the edge of the bed and fall asleep. Under the warm light, the appearance of Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan, which resembled each other, appeared even softer. Old Madam liked them from the beginning. With Mammy Qin's words, she remembered the filial Qin Huayuan. The happiness of being taken care of by a child couldn't help but transfer to Qin Yining. Old Madam hugged Qin Yining and patted her back. Good child, your father is good. You are so similar to your father. You are also a good child. In the past, you suffered a lot. At that time, grandmother also said bad things in anger. Are you sad? Qin Yining couldn't help laughing when she heard this. However, her eyes were a little hot. No matter how old Madam would treat her in the future, at this moment, she could feel that old Madam's affection for her was sincere. Grandmother, what are you saying? Qin Yining immediately changed the way she addressed her. We are a family. I am your biological granddaughter. You can discipline your granddaughter however you want. It's all for my own good. How can I be sad? You are really a good child. Old Madam hugged Qin Yining and patted her back comfortingly as if she was coaxing a child. Grandmother will take good care of you in the future and make up for all the past years. What do you think? As long as I can serve grandmother by her side, granddaughter is already satisfied. Qin Yining rubbed against old Madam's arms. The atmosphere in the room was very warm. Even the flickering of the candlelight appeared cheerful. Mammy Qin seemed to be infected by the happiness between grandmother and granddaughter. She also felt happy and couldn't help smiling. Who knew that at this moment, a scream broke the warm tranquility in the room. Not good. Someone come quickly. Huaining girl has thrown herself to the sea. Old Madam was so shocked that she almost fell off the bed. What? Did you hear what they shouted? Sister Hui has thrown herself to the sea. Mammy Qin secretly scolded the people who were shouting outside and comforted, don't panic. This servant will go and take a look. No, I heard it clearly. They said that Sister Hui has thrown herself to the sea. Old Madam got up in a panic and walked out without wearing her shoes. Qin Yining hurriedly carried her shoes and chased after her. Grandmother, put on your shoes first. Granddaughter will help you out. Mammy Qin also took a large sweater to help old Madam wear it. Only then did she and Qin Yining help old Madam out of the room. At this time, Ji Xiang and Ru Yi had already instructed the maidservant to come over with a lantern. The group of people walked along the corridor to the warm room where Qin Huaining lived. Not long after they walked, the sound of a maidservant crying for help could be heard. Miss, you can't take things too hard. For better or for worse, you should think about old Madam. You still have old Madam. Miss, if you do this, won't you make your loved ones suffer and your enemies happy? What loved ones? What enemies? Were they trying to persuade her or adding firewood to the fire? Mammy Qin's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. She looked at old Madam inquiringly. Old Madam's expression was also not very good. The door of the warm room was wide open. Qin Huaining stood on a black wooden stool with legs and a girdle around her waist. She pulled the white silk with both hands and crossed her legs to hang her neck inside. Mama Kai, Baitong, and Baitong were hugging her legs, and even kneeling down to kowtow. Their cries and sniffles were a mess. What are you doing? Old Madam was so angry that her body was trembling. Sister Hui, why aren't you coming down? I don't have the face to live anymore. Grandmother, please let me go like this. Qin Huaining's tears were pouring down like rain, and her clothes were wet. I was humiliated like this today. Mother also refused to acknowledge me. My heart is about to break. Old Madam, granddaughter is unfilial. Please allow me to go. Let me go. Go where? You are a family Qin girl. Where else do you want to go? Come down. Old Madam was angry and distressed. She ordered everyone, you, help your master down. Yes. Mama Kai, Bai Tong, and Bai Tao hurriedly stood up. Qin Huining had achieved her goal. She cried and softened her body. She fell down and hit Bai Tong and Mama Kai. The two used a lot of strength to prevent Qin Huining from getting hurt, but they themselves were in pain from falling and hitting. Bai Tao pulled Qin Huining's hand and said, "Miss, please get up. Don't make old Madam sad." Qin Huining shook off Bai Tao's hand and knelt in front of old Madam. She hugged old Madam's leg and cried, "Grandmother, why did you ask them to save me? Just let me die." Old Madam frowned. Although her heart ached for Qin Huining, she also felt angry when she saw her doing this. "Sister Hui, what do you want to do by crying and making a fuss? Your father has just been promoted to the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince. The family is celebrating. Who are you cursing?" Qin Huining suddenly raised her head and looked at old Madam in disbelief. Old Madam frowned and said, "I know you feel wronged, but you should be more sensible. Don't you know your mother's temperament? Why did you provoke her? Can't grandmother's kindness to you make up for the grievances in your heart?" "No, it's not." Qin Huining covered her face and sobbed. She used this action to hide the malevolence on her face. Sure enough, even old Madam didn't dote on her anymore. "It's not. But what did I see? You live in my courtyard, but you deliberately hung yourself to block my heart. You have resentment in your heart." Old Madam doted on Qin Huining the most. After reprimanding her, she couldn't bear it. She could only turn her anger to the people around Qin Huining. "Kai Shi, you are a wet nurse. The child is insensible, but you are also insensible. Your master hung the white silk on the beam, but you didn't know to stop her. Later, you hugged her thigh and cried. Who are you putting on this act for? Do you believe that I won't hang you up?" Mama Kai's face turned pale. She trembled and kowtowed repeatedly, saying, "This servant has failed in her duty. This servant doesn't dare." Old Madam's forehead was throbbing, and her body was also trembling. Qin Yining saw this and hurriedly said, "Mammy Qin, I'll have to trouble you to help grandmother go back first. Don't get angry and harm your body. Miss Huining has always been sensible. Today, she must have been impulsive. I'll persuade her again. I think she will be able to think things through soon." Mammy Qin nodded and left this place to Qin Yining to handle. She then kindly persuaded old Madam to go back. Old Madam wasn't feeling well. When she saw that Qin Yining was willing to give Qin Huining a way out, she felt relieved and went to rest. When all of old Madam's people left, only the sobbing Qin Huining and the kneeling Mama Kai, Bai Tong, and Bai Tao were left in the room. Qin Yining sneered. First crying, second throwing a tantrum, and third threatening to hang yourself. Qin Huining, do you think you're performing on stage? What, do you think the house is too peaceful? Who do you think you are? Get out. Qin Huining jumped up with red eyes and pushed Qin Yining. However, Qin Yining grabbed Qin Huining's slender neck. Chapter 56. Qin Huining grabbed Qin Yining's wrists with both hands and tried to pry her fingers apart. However, Qin Yining's hands were like iron pliers. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't loosen them at all. With her throat being choked like this, she gradually found it difficult to breathe. She screamed in a hoarse voice, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and save me. Go and call for help." Mama Kai and Bitao had long been stunned by Qin Yining's fierce actions. When they heard Qin Yining's voice, they came back to their senses and were about to come forward to pull Qin Yining away. However, Qin Yining had accumulated a lot of power. With just a cold glare, Mama Kai and Bitao trembled in fear. Bitao didn't even dare to come forward. Qin Yining flung her hand away in disgust. Qin Huining's legs went soft and she fell to the ground. She covered her neck and coughed. Don't you have the face to live? Old madam is merciful, but I'm a savage who's used to seeing blood. If you want to die but don't dare to do it because you're afraid of pain, I can send you off. Qin Yining's voice was very gentle, but the content of his words made Qin Huining's hair stand on end. Just now, she knew that if Qin Yining really wanted to kill her, it would be useless for her to struggle. She would be strangled to death before she could call for help. The daughter of the Grand Preceptor would kill someone. Who would believe it? Even if the master of the family knew that she had killed her, they would cover it up for the sake of Qin Huayuan's reputation. Since when had her situation in the Qin family become so dangerous? It wasn't just for the sake of riches and honor, but also because her life was in the hands of others. Qin Yining saw that Qin Huining finally showed fear and smiled. You're scared now. Qin Huining, listen carefully to every word I'm going to say. I'm afraid that the news of you surrendering to the imperial family today has already spread throughout the entire He estate. Perhaps all the noble families in the capital will have another topic to gossip about within a month. If you dare to cause trouble one day, I'll hang you up. I think that since you have a record of surrendering to the imperial family, everyone will just think that you're doing it again. He looked at the beam, then looked at Qin Huining. Qin Yining grabbed Mama Kai's collar with one hand and lifted her up as if she was a bag. Mama Kai's feet didn't touch the ground. Qin Yining put her down with a smile. Qin Huining stared at her fearfully. See? I'm not fooling around with you. I still have the strength to hang you up. If you dare to instigate Mother to make her lose face in front of her husband's family, and if you dare to disturb the peace of the family, you can try. Let's see if it's faster for someone to come and save you, or for me to strangle you and hang you up. Twos, he's to her twos. Is to say to Qin and stared her. Mama Kai patted her chest and muttered, is she still human? Is she still human? Bai Tong lowered her head. She recalled shopkeeper Zhong's instructions, and the fear and despair in her eyes increased. Qin Huining screamed after a long time. She angrily smashed the things in the room. Qin Yining went to check on the old madam. After confirming that the old madam was fine, she returned to Snow Pear Courtyard to rest. The next day was the day that the Crown Prince would pay a visit to the Grand Preceptor and hold a banquet. Before dawn, the residence was already bustling with activity. Early in the morning, Master Zhong passed a document from the Records Bureau to Qin Yining through Mama Jing in the kitchen. He whispered in her ear, I've already sent the money. The two young ladies are ready. Qin Yining was stunned. She smiled. I'll have to trouble Mama Jing to make the trip. Qin Yining smiled and gave Mama Jing a heavy brocade pouch embroidered with the word fortune. I'll have to trouble you to take care of me in the future. Take this as a token of my appreciation. You can treat it as buying me some wine. This servant doesn't dare to accept Miss Master's gift. Mama Jing declined in every possible way. We're family. Why are you so polite? If Mama continues to decline, would it mean that you're looking down on me? Qin Yining pretended to be angry. Only then did Mama Jing accept the pouch. After exchanging a few more pleasantries with Qin Yining, she respectfully took her leave. Qin Yining ate the bird's nest porridge sent from the kitchen. She pursed her lips and thought for a while. Then, she smiled and instructed Qiu Lu, go and tidy up the side room next to my bedroom. Don't be careless with the furnishings and bedding. Qiu Lu nodded and went to do her work. Qin Yining took the jade zither and jade chest that Qin Huayuan had just bestowed upon her and went to Xi Shao Garden to pay her respects to the old madam. Today, Xi Shao Garden was calm and peaceful. It was as if the news of Qin Yining wanting to hang herself last night hadn't spread. The Sun Clan, second madam, and third madam all went to the outer courtyard to take care of welcoming the crown prince and arranging the banquet. The old madam brought the well-dressed maidens to Xi Shao Garden to have a chat. When the banquet started, they would go to the front to pay their respects to the crown prince. Qin Yining sized up Qin Yining. She discovered that she was wearing a cross-collared robe today to hide the marks on her neck. She also used an appropriate amount of makeup to cover the red and swollen cheeks that had been hit by the Sun Clan. She was sitting with sixth miss with her head lowered. Overall, she seemed to be well behaved. She thought that it was funny. It seemed that Qin Yining was a non-violent and uncooperative person. A slap was more effective than 100 words of well-meaning advice. Since she was willing to be well-behaved, Qin Yining didn't think too much about it. She chatted with the other maidens and made the old madam laugh happily. At noon, a young maidservant came back and reported, His Highness the Crown Prince has arrived. He's currently in the front courtyard performing the ceremony of apprenticeship with Grand Preceptor. At noon, another person came back and reported, His Highness the Crown Prince, Grand Preceptor, Second Master, Third Master, First Master, and Second Master have gone to the study to talk. At noon, Ji Xiang, who had just gone outside to check on the situation, came back with a smile and reported, Old Madam, His Highness the Crown Prince, the three masters, and the young masters have gone to tour the rear garden. First Madam said that the banquet has already been prepared. The banquet can be held at noon. Old Madam, please take the maidens to the reception pavilion. The old madam was in an extremely good mood and nodded, understood. Then, the old madam checked the maidens' attire again. Who would have thought that in less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn, a young girl hurriedly ran in from the outside. She spoke in rapid succession in the corridor. Old Madam. Huining's maidens, Bai Tong and Xiao Ai, offended His Highness the Crown Prince in the rear garden just now. Grand Preceptor has already ordered the two of them to be driven out. Grand Preceptor also ordered the old madam to lock Miss Huining in the woodshed. He will have something to ask later. Qin Yining stood up abruptly when he heard this. He widened his eyes in horror and looked at the old madam for help. What's going on? Bai Tong didn't follow me this morning. She said that her period came and she wasn't feeling well. I saw that she wasn't feeling well, so I didn't take her with me. Why did she run to the rear garden and offend His Highness? The old madam frowned and ordered Mammy Qin, Lujuan, quickly go and find out what happened. Then, come back to me. Yes. Mammy Qin hurriedly left. Qin Yining lowered his eyes and took a sip of the warm tea. It was slightly bitter in the mouth, but it had a refreshing aftertaste. It was a good tea. The maidens, who were originally excited to see His Highness at the banquet at noon, were now a little uneasy, especially Qin Yining. His face was pale and cold sweat flowed down. He guessed what had happened. Why did his father want to lock him in the woodshed? After a while, Mammy Qin came back. Old Madam. Mammy Qin's face was very ugly. This servant has found out what happened. Bai Tong and Xiao Ai didn't know that Grand Preceptor, Second Old Master, and Third Old Master took His Highness to the rear garden. The two of them were idle today, so they chatted behind the rockery. As a result, His Highness and Grand Preceptor heard it clearly. They said. The old madam frowned. What did they say? Please come back to Chu. This servant has brought Grand Preceptor's personal attendant, Chi Tai. Let Chi Tai talk to you. Quickly call him here. Chi Tai was in his 30s this year. He had been with Qin Huayuan for a long time, and he was loyal and smart. When he came, he didn't enter the inner chamber. He just knelt outside the screen, and only his figure could be vaguely seen. As His Highness and the others were walking, they heard two maidens muttering. They said that fourth young miss was an idiot who lacked a nerve in her brain. She didn't even know that she had been framed. The maidservant who stole old Madam's bracelet was actually Miss Huaning, ordered by Tong to frame her. They also said that old Madam was easy to fool. She believed them and kicked them out. At that time, this servant was behind Grand Preceptor and His Highness. This servant heard this clearly. His Highness must have also heard it. His Highness didn't say anything at that time, but Grand Preceptor's face was very ugly. He angrily rebuked the two maidens who gossiped. Grand Preceptor was merciful and didn't kill them. He just directly kicked them out. The room was silent. Everyone's eyes were on Qin Yining and Qin Huaning. No wonder First Old Master wanted to lock Qin Huaning in the woodshed. It turned out that Qin Yining's maidservant had been framed by her for stealing. She had been exposed in front of the Crown Prince. Moreover, it was an adopted daughter who had framed the maidservant of the legitimate daughter. If this kind of news spread, what would people say? It was hard to guarantee that no one would say that Grand Preceptor Qin couldn't even clean up the inner chamber. If he didn't clean up the room, how could he sweep the world? Old Madam was so angry that her face turned purple. She fiercely threw the brass tobacco pipe in her hand, and it hit Qin Huaning's shoulder. It hurt so much that she cried out in pain. You still have the face to cry. Come, lock Qin Huaning in the woodshed. Without First Old Master's permission, no one is allowed to see her. Old Madam, I didn't. I really didn't. I was wronged. Someone must have framed me. You still dare to quibble at this time. Take her away, take her away. Old Madam angrily pounded the table. A sturdy older female servant came in, covered Qin Huaning's mouth, and pulled her out. The room was dead silent. Because of Ruilan's theft, many people had mocked Qin Yining for not knowing how to discipline servants. There were even more outrageous people who said that if the upper beam wasn't straight, the lower beam would be crooked. Now that the truth was out, everyone felt a little embarrassed when they looked at Qin Yining. Just at this time, someone came in from outside. Old Madam, Duchess Ding sent two maidservants to fourth young lady. As soon as the voice fell, the head maidservant Ji Xiang brought the two maidservants in with a subtle expression. After seeing the two of them, everyone's eyes focused on Qin Yining again. Old Madam pointed at one of them in surprise and said, Aren't you Ruilan? This servant Song Lan greets Old Madam and fourth young lady. Ruilan had now changed her name to Song Lan. She smiled and bowed. Chapter 57. Although Old Madam was a bit biased, she wasn't a muddle-headed person. How could she not understand at this time? Was all of this done by Qin Yining? Old Madam looked inquiringly at Qin Yining. Qin Yining gave her a well-behaved smile, which was equivalent to tacit agreement. For a moment, Old Madam really couldn't tell what she was feeling in her heart. She had the feeling that she had brought home a puppy, but after raising it for a few days, she found out that it was a wolf cub. Old Madam had observed Qin Yining for so long, so she naturally believed in Qin Yining's character. However, Qin Yining's various actions really made him look like someone who could frame someone else. Old Madam also believed in Qin Huayuan's judgment. Even if she was muddle-headed for a moment, her son wouldn't be deceived. However, what did Qin Yining do to make things develop to this point? Did the two maidservants really happen to be talking behind the rockery? No matter what she did, reality had given those who had once mocked Qin Yining a hard slap in the face. Saying that, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Who was the one who had instigated the servant girls to frame the D daughter's servant girl? saying that she couldn't even protect her own servant girl and could only be manipulated by others. How could Ruelon, who was standing here openly, be explained? The former Ruelon, now Songlon, not only came back unharmed, she even received a monthly salary from Duke Ding's mansion. Her status was above all the servant girls in the family Qin. If this was called not being able to protect her own servant girl, then what should she do? The young ladies present carefully thought about it. If this matter happened to them, they weren't sure that they could bring back the servant girl who had been framed. She might have already died from the beating at the beginning. The young ladies looked at Qin Yining with awe. Everyone's surprise lasted only for a breath. After Song Lan bowed, everyone saw an apple-faced young lady who looked to be 12 or 13 years old. She was pink and cute and wore a light pink vest. She obediently bowed and said crisply, "This servant is Bing Tang. Greetings to old madam and young ladies." Bing Tang. Old madam regained her senses. Her voice was a little dry. She had some guesses about her identity. "This name is rather sweet. What was your original name?" Bing Tang smiled and replied, replying to old madam, "This servant's surname was originally Tang." Old madam and the ladies all understood. This was the reason why Qin Yining was locked up in the ancestral hall to study. Miss Tang's status was even higher than Song Lan's. The Dowager Duchess said, "Miss Tang, please get up. There's no need to be so polite." She was very clear about the methods of Qing Lu and the others. The person in front of her was protected by Qing Lu. If she didn't do a good job, she would be eaten alive by those mad dogs. Bing Tang smiled and said, "Old madam, please don't be like this. This servant's life was saved by 4th Mississippi. This servant will be loyal to 4th Miss for the rest of my life. You are 4th Miss's grandmother. Naturally, you are this servant's master." Old madam's mouth twitched. She had been the mistress of the house for most of her life. Now that a little girl was willing to bow to her, it was because of Qin Yining's face. Old madam rubbed her forehead and waved her hand to let Song Lan and Bing Tang retreat. The two of them naturally stood behind Qin Yining. Everyone chatted for a while. It was almost time for the banquet to start. Old madam took her granddaughters to the front parlor. The parlor was as warm as spring. Bypassing the large screen of the 5 blessings, they directly faced 2 rows of officials' hat chairs covered with gorilla red chairs. Behind the officials' hat chairs, there were 2 halls, east and west. The male guests and the female guests were separated by black painted folding screens carved with plum blossoms, orchids, bamboo and chrysanthemum. Yu Yen was dressed in a dazzling purple brocade robe. He wore a purple gold hairpin crown on his head and a bamboo jade belt on his waist. Among his noble aura, there was a scholarly aura. Old madam and the girls didn't dare to look directly at the crown prince. They all knelt down and bowed. Yu Yen supported old madam with both hands and didn't let her kneel. "Old madam, please rise. You must not be so polite. You are Grand Preceptor Qin's mother. This consort is Grand Preceptor Qin's student. You are my elder." Old madam repeatedly said, "I don't dare." Then she said, "There is a difference in status. Women don't dare to overstep." After being polite, Yu Yen looked at Qin Yining. At this time, Qin Yining was kneeling with her sisters. He didn't notice Yu Yen's gaze. However, Qin Huayuan, 2nd Old Master, 3rd Old Master, Old Madam, and other elders saw it clearly. Old Madam's heart skipped a beat. Then, some faint hope sprouted in her heart. Right now, Qin Yining and the Crown Prince were well matched in terms of social status. If Qin Yining could become the Crown Prince's official consort and become the mistress of the Eastern Palace, in the future, when old madam thought of this, her palms became sweaty from excitement. She led the girls around the screen and went to the side hall on the west side. The men, on the other hand, went to the east side hall. After taking their seats, there was a folding screen and a central hall in the middle. The two sides couldn't see each other and their voices couldn't be heard very clearly. Sun Clan, second Old Madam, and third Old Madam all stood to the side and served Old Madam. Sun Clan's complexion wasn't very good. There were obvious dark circles under her eyes. It was obvious that she didn't sleep well last night. At this time, she already knew that Qin Huining's maidservant had committed a crime. Seeing that Qin Huining wasn't at the table, she asked Old Madam in a low voice, "You've already locked Sister Hui in the woodshed?" When Old Madam heard this, she immediately lost her appetite. She put down the ivory knife and glanced at Sun Clan. Her eyes were full of warning as she said, "Sister Hui made a mistake. She should be punished. Brother Meng has already intervened in this matter. You don't have to worry about it." Sun Clan's hands trembled when she heard this. She almost dropped the serving chopsticks and small white porcelain plates. What did she mean by she didn't have to worry about it? What did they want to do to her sister Hui? Yesterday, she indeed had a disagreement with Sister Hui. However, Sister Hui was her daughter that she had raised for 14 years. The mother-daughter relationship was still there. Sun Clan knew that Old Madam was currently angry and could only smile apologetically. "Old Madam, don't be angry. It's the middle of winter now. How can a good girl be locked in the woodshed? That will cause illness." At this time, Qin Yining had already put down his chopsticks and rinsed his mouth. He quietly looked at Sun Clan. At the womenfolk side, regardless of whether they were really eating or pretending to be busy eating, they all pricked up their ears to listen to the movements at Sun Clan and Old Madam's side. Old Madam waved her hand and said, "Let's not talk about this matter at this time." Sun Clan still wanted to speak, but Second Madam and Third Madam, one on the left and one on the right, held her arms and said in a low voice, "Eldest sister-in-law loves her daughter very much. In any case, let's wait until things calm down first. The Crown Prince is still here." Upon hearing this, Sun Clan pursed their lips. After weighing the pros and cons, they could only shut their mouths for the time being. After the banquet and tea, the apprenticeship ceremony was completed. The entire family went together to respectfully send the Crown Prince off. The group of masters sent him off in a grandiose manner. Yu Qiyan was still draped in that snow-white armpit fur cloak. The snow-white color paired with the gorgeous purple color made him appear noble and graceful. He stood beside the carriage and saluted Qin Huayuan as he bid farewell. He saluted him as a teacher and student. Qin Huayuan also returned the salute of a monarch and a minister. Yu Qiyan boarded the 8 treasures colored glass tassel carriage with the help of the chamberlains. He lifted the curtain and looked outside. He nodded his head in greeting to the men of the family Qin. Finally, his gaze fell on the touch of red among the womenfolk. Among the womenfolk, other than Third Aunt who wore a rose-red cloak, only Qin Yining wore the embroidered cloak with the red and white rabbit fur. In the midst of the colorful crowd, this touch of red was particularly eye-catching. Although he couldn't see her appearance clearly, Yu Qiyan had already outlined her every frown and smile in his mind. He suddenly felt his ears and cheeks heat up. He hurriedly let down the curtain and gave the order to depart. The Crown Prince's last glance was noticed by all the womenfolk. Because they were too far away, they couldn't tell who the Crown Prince was looking at. Qin Yining also felt that he wasn't familiar enough with the Crown Prince to need to use his eyes to say goodbye, so he didn't think too much about it. However, Miss Seven, who was standing shoulder to shoulder with Qin Yining, was already blushing. She slowly relaxed her back that had uncontrollably tensed up when the Crown Prince was looking at her. Was the Crown Prince looking at her? Just now, when she was kneeling in the flower pavilion before eating, Miss Seven had secretly raised her head to look. Unexpectedly, when she raised her head, the Crown Prince happened to look over. She frantically lowered her head and felt the Crown Prince's gaze on her for a long time. Just now, when they were sending each other off, the Crown Prince must have been looking at her. None of the girls in the family had any relationship with the Crown Prince. Only she had almost met the Crown Prince's gaze when she was bowing. The Crown Prince was so elegant and handsome, and so noble and graceful. Right now, the Emperor only had one son. The Crown Prince was the only choice to inherit the throne in the future. Thinking of this, Miss Seven's heart began to beat wildly. Miss Eight saw Miss Seven standing there in a daze. Everyone had walked inside, but she was still standing there with a red face. She couldn't help but ask worriedly, "Miss Seven, did you catch a cold? Why is your face so red?" "Ah, no, it's nothing." Miss Seven patted her cheeks and followed everyone back into the inner residence. The Crown Prince was out in the back garden and unexpectedly encountered this kind of matter. At this time, he definitely had to deal with it. Moreover, it also involved the relationship between the eldest branch's adopted daughter and daughter. Therefore, second aunt and third aunt didn't stay for long. They only sent the old madam to the entrance of Ci Shao Garden and then left with the people from each branch. The princess of the Sun clan didn't wait for them to go far or enter the door. She pulled on the old madam's sleeve and anxiously pleaded, "Mother, how about we let Sister Hui out first? It wouldn't be good if she froze." The old madam disliked the princess of the Sun clan the most. When she was in her teens, she could be said to be naive and unaffected. When she was in her 20s or 30s, she could be said to have matured late. But now, she was 40 years old and still looked like she didn't know anything. How could she be worthy of her outstanding eldest son? This kind of person was actually the wife of their family Qin. It was simply a joke. Chapter 58. The Sun clan had always been a proud daughter of heaven. When had she ever suffered such grievances? Being reprimanded by the old madam to her face really made her lose all her face. Her face flushed red, and she quickly refuted, "Old madam, you can't say that. Why did you always say that Sister Hui was raised under your watch when Sister Hui performed well in the past? Previously, you said that in order to help your daughter-in-law, you personally taught Sister Hui. Why is it that now that Sister Hui's servant made a mistake, you instead question me first? I wasn't the only one who taught her to be like this." When the old madam heard this, she was so angry that she almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. At that time, she was really blinded by lard. How could she think that Sun Haihan, this stupid woman who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, was worthy of her outstanding eldest son? Sun clan, is this the tone that a daughter-in-law should use to speak to a mother-in-law? What do you mean? As a mother-in-law, I helped you raise your daughter. Not only are you not grateful, but you blame me for not teaching her well. Am I her mother, or are you her mother? The old madam was furious. She pointed at the Sun clan and said, "I originally thought that you were already more sensible when you took the initiative to come back this time. I didn't expect you to still be like this. You really are a rotten wood that can't be carved." The Sun clan was scolded until tears welled up in her eyes. She straightened her neck and said, "Old madam, do you still love your sweetheart or not? Why are you implicating me again? I'm a rotten wood that can't be carved now. But in the end, it wasn't my Sun clan that tried to form a marriage alliance. Wasn't it your esteemed residents who found someone to make peace with our Duke's residence? Although I don't say how good I am these years, Qin Meng has a meteoric rise. I still have the luck to bring fortune to my husband. Why does old madam dislike me now? You. The old madam was livid by the Sun clan's words. If you were my daughter, I would have slapped you away. A mother-in-law could set rules for her daughter-in-law, but if she really hit her daughter-in-law, she would still be laughed at by the people in the noble circle. If this spread out, it would also give old Madam the reputation of being an evil mother-in-law. Therefore, even though there were times when old Madam was willful, she had never touched her daughter-in-law. It was just that the Sun Clan's words today had gone too far. Old Madam was already very angry because of the incident caused by Qin Huaining. Now that she was angered by the Sun Clan, her vision turned black. She held her head and her body swayed. She almost fell down. Matriarch Mammy Qin and Qin Yining hurriedly supported her. Are you all right? Go inside and have a rest. Qin Yining, on the other hand, secretly shook his head at the Sun Clan, indicating that she shouldn't say anything more, lest she get into trouble. He turned around and helped the old madam into the room with Mammy Qin. The Sun Clan clenched her fists tightly and trembled with anger. It wasn't that she didn't want to control her temper, but controlling her temper was too much for her. She had been raised by her grandmother since she was a child. Her parents were also very kind to her. When had she ever suffered like this? If it weren't for Qin Huaiyuan's face, she wouldn't be bothered to serve this kind of unruly and evil mother-in-law. The Sun Clan really wanted to turn around and leave. But after thinking about it, they still had to care about old Madam. Otherwise, they would be gossiped about. They could only follow behind the three people and enter the room. Qin Yining and Mammy Qin had already helped old Madam lie down and confirmed that old Madam was fine. Then, the two of them persuaded her in a low voice. The Sun Clan stood to the side and quietly watched them help old Madam take off her shoes and socks. They comforted her softly. Old Madam closed her eyes and looked like she didn't want to say another word. The Sun Clan knew that it was useless to plead for leniency today. She thought about it. In the end, she still felt that Qin Huaining wasn't such a person. Perhaps someone was sowing discord behind Qin Huaining's back. The Sun Clan went to the warm room and found Mama Kai, who was by Qin Huaining's side, to ask about the ins and outs of the matter. Mama Kai was Mother Jin's niece, and Mother Jin was the Sun Clan's wet nurse. When the Sun Clan saw Mama Kai, they felt that she was one of them, so they spoke directly to her. Did Sister Hui instruct Bidong to frame Sister Yi's maidservant? Madam, how can you think that way? You know how gentle and sensible Miss Huaining is. She's living like she's walking on thin ice now. Last night, she almost hanged herself, but she didn't succeed. Instead, she was strangled by 4th Mississippi. She said that she wanted to die but didn't dare to, so she could help us. At this point, Mama Kai's voice was full of tears. Now, if Madam refuses to believe Miss Huaining, then Miss Huaining really won't be able to make a name for herself. Bidong is usually arrogant. Perhaps she has some crooked thoughts and deliberately framed Miss Huaining. As Mama Kai wiped her tears, she didn't forget to carefully observe the Sun Clan's expressions. When she saw that the Sun Clan most likely believed her, she secretly sighed in relief. How could she admit that Qin Huaining framed someone? Because she was the one who came up with that idea for Qin Huaining. Now that Qin Huaining was exposed, Mama Kai was afraid that people would find out that she was the one who instigated her master. She would definitely insist that Qin Huaining was wrongly accused. When the Sun Clan saw Mama Kai's determination, they firmly believed her. When she heard Mama Kai say that Qin Yining had once treated Qin Huaining in such a way, she couldn't help but frown. However, her impression of Qin Yining had improved. She felt that this matter was most likely exaggerated, so she didn't ask any further. Since you say so, I'll believe Sister Hui. But who would deliberately frame Sister Hui? Also, how could Bidong and Xiao Ai be so coincidental that Master and the Crown Prince happened to pass by and say those words? No matter how I think about it, I feel that someone set that up. When Mama Kai saw that the Sun Clan believed her, she finally felt relieved. She pursed her lips and said, "Madam is a sensible person. There are some things that need this servant to say. It's obvious who framed Miss Huaning. Now, the person who benefits the most is that person." Who benefits the most? The Sun Clan thought back to what happened today. Although she wasn't in the matriarch's room to serve her, she knew that Qin Yining had brought back 2 servant girls from Duke Ding's residence. Moreover, one of them was Ruelan, who had been suspected of theft. Now, who benefits the most? It was obviously Qin Yining. The Sun Clan's brows furrowed into a knot. She didn't want to believe that Qin Yining would harm Qin Huaning. However, after hearing Mama Kai's words, her heart wavered. Just as the Sun Clan's mind was about to turn into a pot of paste, Qin Yining brought people to the warm room. "Madam is really here. I guessed that you were here." Behind Qin Yining were Bing Tang, Song Lan, Yao Qin, and Yu Qi. The Sun Clan was very busy today. She only brought Kai Ju with her, and she wasn't by her side right now. Thinking back to Qin Yining's appearance when he first returned to the residence, and then looking at her current situation, the Sun Clan couldn't help but think carefully. Qin Yining's methods were so powerful. Did he have the heart to harm others? "Mother, what's wrong? Why are you looking at me without saying anything?" Qin Yining had some guesses in his heart, but he still maintained a smile on his face. The Sun Clan frowned and said, "Come with me." As she spoke, she pulled Qin Yining's hand and quickly walked towards Xingning Garden. At the same time, in the woodshed, Qin Huayuan stood with his hands behind his back in front of Qin Huaning, who was kneeling on the ground and crying. He said in a deep voice, "Say what you need to say. Don't drag it out. I don't have that much patience." Chapter 59. At this moment, Qin Huaning felt an unprecedented fear. She was no longer facing the old madam or the Sun Clan, who could make her cry and throw a tantrum. Instead, she was facing Qin Huayuan, who exuded a dignified aura. Qin Huayuan had been immersed in the imperial court for many years. Even the ministers outside were afraid of his methods, let alone Qin Huaning, who was only a 14-year-old girl. Qin Huaning felt Qin Huayuan's sharp eyes sweep over her body. She felt as if she had been cut open by a knife. Even the curves of her intestines could be seen clearly. There was no place for her to hide any lies. She definitely didn't have the guts to lie in front of Qin Huayuan. However, if she told the truth, her position in the hearts of the elders would be completely ruined. Thinking of this, Qin Huaning gritted her teeth and choked out, "Father, please calm down. I know this is my fault. Originally, Sister Yi and I didn't get along well. My wet nurse gave me an idea and said that I could use this opportunity to suppress Sister Yi's spirit. I didn't think too much about it and handed the matter over to my wet nurse to arrange. I didn't expect that she would frame Sister Yi's servant, Ruelan, for theft." At this point, Qin Huaning raised her eyes and secretly glanced at Qin Huayuan. She saw that his expression was calm and he was still standing in the same posture as before. He was like an old monk in meditation. She didn't know if Qin Huayuan had heard what she said, but she became more and more nervous. I originally wanted to say it, but my wet nurse also wanted to help me vent my anger. I thought that Ruelan would just be beaten up and driven out, so I didn't care. I just didn't expect things to develop to this point." Qin Huaning began to sob again. She couldn't help but wipe her tears with her sleeves. She raised her head and secretly glanced at Qin Huayuan. Unexpectedly, Qin Huayuan also looked down at this moment. When their eyes met, Qin Huaning was so frightened that her heart beat wildly. She almost fell to the ground. "You didn't expect it." "I really didn't expect it." Shut up, you don't have to say any more. Qin Huayuan's voice was indifferent. He turned his head around and ordered Chitai, who was standing outside, you go and tell the people inside. First, drag the wet nurse of the Huining girl out of the door and beat her 40 times with the plank, then send her home and never let her work again. Secondly, change the maidservants by Miss Huining's side to a new batch. Let old madam and first madam put the maidservants who originally served Miss Huining somewhere else. There's only one point. These people are not allowed to serve any miss closely. Qin Huining stared blankly at Qin Huayuan. Suddenly, he burst into tears and tried to hug Qin Huayuan's leg. Father, you can't do this. Mama Kai and the people around me are innocent. Besides, if you punish them, how can I raise my head in the future? Who else would dare to stay by his daughter's side? Although I'm not your biological daughter, I've been raised by your side for many years. Don't tell me you don't care about my life or death at all. Qin Huayuan flicked his sleeve and waved Qin Huining away. He frowned and continued, thirdly, Miss Huining made a mistake this time because of the instigation of the wicked servants by her side. Let everyone watch their mouths and not talk about her behind her back. Fourthly, it's not appropriate for Miss Huining to stay in old madam's courtyard. It's easy to anger the elderly. Move Miss Huining out of Xia Shao Garden's warm room to Snow Pear Courtyard. Go to Snow Pear Courtyard and help fourth Miss move. Clean up the Shuoran Courtyard for fourth Miss to live in. It's also convenient for her to frequently visit old madam's courtyard. When Qin Huining heard Qin Huayuan order everyone not to talk about it, she let out a sigh of relief. However, when she heard the following words, she immediately fell to the cold floor of the woodshed with a pale face. The Shuoran Courtyard was a small building where Qin Huayuan lived alone when he was young. Originally, it was called the Qingxin Courtyard. Qin Huayuan's appearance was outstanding. At that time, the old great-grandfather was still alive. One day, when he was strolling through the garden, he passed by the Qingxin Courtyard. He pointed at the horizontal board and said, "What Qingxin Courtyard? It's not a temple for monks. My eldest grandson is so handsome. In the future, he'll have to marry at least one wife and take 10 beautiful concubines." He then pulled Qin Huayuan over and asked, Come. Menggu, recite a poem that describes beautiful women for grandfather." At that time, Qin Huayuan was still young. He was teased until his face and neck turned red. He recited a line from the Book of Songs that described the noble beauty of Jiang Nu Zhuang. The Shuoran Courtyard is full of vigor. His clothes are embroidered and embroidered. His hands are soft and supple, his skin is creamy, his collar is like a bamboo, and his teeth are like a gourd. The old great-grandfather then said, "This poem is talking about my eldest grandson. In the future, this Qingxin Courtyard will be called the Shuoran Courtyard." Who wouldn't listen to the old great-grandfather's words? At that time, the family wasn't as wealthy as it was now. The residence wasn't as big as it was now. They expanded it once and built a back garden, but the Shuoran Courtyard was still preserved. Later, the old great-grandfather passed away. Whenever Qin Huayuan missed his grandfather, he would often go to the Shuoran Courtyard for a visit. When Qin Huayuan was young, he liked the scenery here. He had asked his father for it twice, but his father refused to give it to him. At that time, his grandmother comforted him, saying that the Shuoran Courtyard would be for the legitimate son to live in. She was a girl and couldn't live there. Qin Huayuan gradually gave up on the idea. He didn't expect that his father would now give the Shuoran Courtyard to Qin Yining. Wasn't Qin Yining also a girl? Why was Qin Yining allowed to live there, but she couldn't? However, no matter how unwilling he was, Qin Huayuan didn't have time to be jealous. She immediately thought of her own worrisome situation. She moved from Xia Shao Garden to Snow Pear Courtyard, and all the people who used to serve her were driven away. It was like she was in the dark. How was she going to live in the future? Father, please have mercy. You can't treat me like this. Your daughter still has to live in the future. If you do this, how can I have the face to live? Why don't you reward me with a rope and let me hang myself? Qin Huayuan once again hugged Qin Huayuan's leg. Qin Huayuan took 2 steps back, frowning and shaking his head. A girl who was raised by the Sun clan and the old madam's side was pampered and spoiled since she was young. However, she only had a few small schemes in her mind and didn't see the big picture at all. When she encountered problems, she would only cry and make a fuss. She didn't have the demeanor of a general at all. It was enough to show the importance of his blood. In the end, it was his own daughter who had inherited his bloodline. Although Qin Huayuan had a father-daughter relationship with Qin Huayuan, he was still dissatisfied that his own daughter was framed and bullied. As for why he and the crown prince would coincidentally hear Bitong's words from behind the rockery, Qin Huayuan didn't need to think to know that this was arranged by that little girl. Qin Huayuan was being schemed against by his own daughter. He only felt angry and amused at the same time. Huever, he needed to educate his daughter, but he needed to punish people with impure thoughts first. Sister Hui. Qin Huayuan's voice was normal, and he didn't even raise his pitch. He said flatly and straightforwardly, "As my daughter, you should know clearly what you should and shouldn't do. You don't need to threaten me with things like hanging myself. I'm not the old madam." Qin Huayuan was so scared that she couldn't even cry. Her father actually knew about this matter. She always thought that her father wouldn't get involved in matters of the inner residence. A fool is bound to be a fool. You said that the people around you did bad things and made you take the blame. Fine, I believe you and dealt with the people around you. The next time you commit a crime, it won't be the people around you who instigated it, right? If you don't have the ability to restrain your servants, then I'll have to reconsider your future. You're on your own now. Qin Huayuan calmly threw down a heavy hammer, turned around, and left. Qin Huayuan sat there blankly for a long time, unable to regain her senses. Every word Qin Huayuan said was like a slap to her face. Although her face wasn't hit, it was still burning and swollen to a purple eggplant skin. However, her unwillingness and resentment were even stronger than before. She indeed wasn't his biological daughter, but he couldn't treat her like this. After doting on her for so many years, he suddenly told her that she wasn't his legitimate daughter and took away everything she had to give to Qin Yining. How innocent was she? Although Qin Huayuan had instructed Qi Tai, there were some things that he still needed to say to the old madam personally. Therefore, he left the woodshed and directly went to the old madam's place. The old madam was so angry that her vision turned black and she almost couldn't breathe. Now, she had already recovered and was leaning on a big soft pillow to eat ginseng soup. Seeing that Qin Huayuan had come, the old madam couldn't help but reveal a happy smile on her face. "Have you finished your work outside?" "It's already finished." "Mother, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" "I." The old madam sighed and told him about the Sun clans clamoring with her just now. Qin Huayuan was silent for a moment and said, "Mother, don't be angry. You know the Sun clan's temper. Sun will talk to her later." Seeing that Qin Huayuan was so busy every day and still had to worry about this kind of thing, the old madam became more and more displeased with the Sun clan. However, for the sake of her son, it wasn't good to continue to harp on the Sun clan. Qin Huayuan also told the old madam about his decision just now. When the old madam heard that Qin Huining was going to move to Snow Pear Courtyard, the old madam frowned. "The people around her are not good. Just punish them. Snow Pear Courtyard is so remote. Let her move out from my place and just let her go back to Xingning Garden." "Why do you want her to go to such a remote place?" Mother, if she stays in Xingning Garden, the Sun Clan will be more likely to cause trouble. Moreover, Snow Pear Courtyard is remote. If Sister Yi can live there, why can't Sister Hui? The old madam was speechless by Qin Huayuan's words. She said embarrassedly, "At that time, I was just suspicious of Sister Yi's bloodline. In a fit of anger, I casually said that. Am I a bad grandmother who mistreats her granddaughter?" Then she said, "Then why are you finally willing to give the Shuoran courtyard to someone?" Qin Huayuan wouldn't hold on to his mother's fault. He said with a smile, "It's idle anyway. Sister Yi is already 14 years old. At most, she will be married in a few years. If she has a legitimate son in the future, it's not a bad thing to move in." When it came to Qin Yining's marriage, the old madam remembered the look in the Crown Prince's eyes when he looked at Qin Yining today. Does His Highness the Crown Prince have feelings for Sister Yi? Qin Huayuan smiled mysteriously. "Mother, now that I am the Crown Prince's tutor, my status is naturally different from before. If my daughter wants to get married, I'm afraid it's not just our family that can make the decision. In the future, we just need to wait and see." The old madam understood as soon as she heard this. She said with a smile, "If the emperor is willing to make the decision, then it's our family Qin's honor. It's also good for Sister Yi to go to the Shuoran courtyard. Not to mention that it's close to me, the Shuoran courtyard is where you used to live and study. It's also good for her to be influenced by books." "That's exactly what I mean." Qin Huayuan nodded with a smile. Replying to the old madam and first master, first madam and fourth miss have prepared black chicken soup to nourish the old madam's body. Ji Xiang came in and answered with a smile. Chapter 60. The Sun Clan took the initiative to bring a bowl of black-bone chicken soup to express their goodwill. This was completely out of old madam's expectations. Mammy Qin had just quietly told old madam that the Sun Clan went to the warm room to see Mama Kai. After coming out, they angrily pulled Qin Yining away. It was obvious that they wanted to vent their anger on Qin Yining. Old madam was already waiting to hear what kind of ruckus Sun had caused. Who would have thought that after such a short while, both mother and daughter were actually smiling, as if all the unpleasantness had never happened. Qin Yining also didn't look like he had been reprimanded at all. The Sun Clan even took the initiative to soften their stance and apologize. Old madam and Qin Huayuan both knew what kind of character the Sun Clan had, so they coincidentally smiled at Qin Yining approvingly. "Old madam, your daughter-in-law was impulsive just now. Everything is my fault. I love my daughter dearly, but I'm not unfilial to my mother-in-law. You know that I've always been like this. After being impulsive, I regret it. Your daughter-in-law apologizes to you here." The Sun Clan's voice became hoarse as she spoke. These were already the softest words she could say. Just now, Qin Yining and her analyzed that Qin Huayuan would definitely come. It was better to take advantage of this opportunity to show off. At first, she didn't want to admit defeat. However, in Qin Yining's mouth, admitting defeat was retreating in order to advance. She thought it made sense. The relationship between her and Qin Huayuan indeed needed to be repaired. She couldn't make things worse. That was why she listened to Qin Yining's suggestion for the time being. Regardless of what the Sun Clan thought, Qin Huayuan was satisfied that the Sun Clan could do this. "Mother, don't be angry. If you're angry, what should I do? The Sun Clan is short-tempered and always speaks without meaning. She is still filial to you." The Sun Clan was willing to admit defeat, and her son also said good words. The two people gave old madam a way out. Old madam also felt that her face was not bad and didn't want to make things difficult for her son, so she said, "Get up. We're all one family. Don't be like this in the future." The members of the Sun clan breathed a sigh of relief when they heard this. They hurriedly opened the black lacquered food box and took out the black chicken soup. They personally took a spoon and served it to Old Madam. Actually, Old Madam had just eaten the ginseng soup. She didn't want to eat the black chicken soup yet. However, considering her son, she still ate half a bowl of soup from the Sun clan. Only then did the members of the Sun clan feel completely relieved. They shyly glanced at Qin Huayuan. Qin Huayuan calmly nodded at the Sun clan. The Sun clan members' faces began to turn red again, and their hearts began to jump with joy. Seeing her parents like this, Qin Yining secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If the family was harmonious, everything would prosper. It was inappropriate for her mother to be enemies with Old Madam and challenge her husband. She also spent a lot of effort to persuade them to reconcile. Fortunately, her words weren't in vain. Old Madam smiled and waved at Qin Yining, letting her come to her side. "Your father and I were just talking about your matter." Qin Yining came forward and asked, "Did grandmother tell my father that I didn't study hard and made him angry?" "You little girl." Old Madam was amused by her and laughed. "You didn't study hard, so grandmother hit you first. Why wait until now to tell your father? Just now, it was your father who said that you should move to the Shuoran study house. The Shuoran study house is adjacent to the back garden. The scenery there is excellent. It's warm in the winter and cool in the summer. There are also many of your father's books. Your father lived in the Shuoran study house when he was young. Now, perhaps you can read those books and get the smell of books and ink. What do you think?" When Qin Yining went to the back garden, she had already noticed the elegant courtyard of the Shuoran study house. She also inquired about its origin. At this time, she liked it very much. She said with a happy expression, "Thank you, grandmother." "Thank you, father. If I move to the Shuoran study house, I can often come to grandmother's place to eat." Old Madam laughed again when she heard this. She pointed at Qin Yining and called her, "Naughty monkey." Qin Yining said that she could often come to eat. Although it was a mischievous remark, it was telling Old Madam and Qin Huayuan that she understood her father's arrangement and wouldn't fail to live up to it. Qin Huayuan saw that she understood with a hint and was satisfied. Thinking of today's matter, he said in a flat tone, "Sister Yi, did you arrange for the girl who spoke behind the rockery to come here?" Old Madam looked at Qin Yining inquiringly. Sun Clan's daughter widened her eyes in surprise and shouted, "You really did harm to Sister Hui." Madam Sun's voice was too sharp, and it completely ruined the originally lively atmosphere. Qin Huayuan looked at her with displeasure when he heard her voice. Qin Yining didn't want to care about the Sun Clan's attitude towards her. She just pretended that she didn't hear this and said to Qin Huayuan with a smile, "Yes, father. This matter was indeed arranged by me. Miss Huining asked Bidong and Mama Kai to deceive Ruelan when I was reciting books in the ancestral hall and framed her for stealing grandmother's jade bracelet. Ruelan was beaten with a board for no reason. If she wasn't lucky, she might have been beaten to death on the spot. I can understand Miss Huining's difficulties, but I can't forgive her for disregarding other people's lives just for a moment of pleasure. If she is dissatisfied with me, she can come at me, but she doesn't dare and can't hurt an innocent maidservant by my side. How pitiful is Ruelan." As for Bidong and Xiao Ai, who were chased out, Bidong stole my jewelry, and Xiao Ai has always been a thief. The two of them deserve it. They can find a new business after going out, and they won't starve to death. So today, I just let the truth come out. Only. Qin Huayuan chuckled and said, "You made a big fuss out of this only. You can tell me directly or your grandmother. Why did you bring this matter to the Crown Prince? Aren't you afraid of ruining your father's career?" Qin Yining could hear Qin Huayuan's half-true and half-false complaints. She could also see the old madam's frown when Qin Huaiyuan talked about his career. She wasn't nervous and continued, I naturally thought of this, but father's career won't be affected. The crown prince has a gentle temperament and is obsessed with painting and calligraphy. Although he wants to work hard, he doesn't have the talent. What he lacks is exactly what father has. Father is politically astute, his methods are shrewd and ruthless, and his judgment of the situation is extremely accurate. In the future, the crown prince will rely on father's power in many ways. Therefore, whether it is in terms of his nature or his consideration of the future, he will not care about these small matters of a girl's family. What's more, father taught the crown prince the first lesson by example. Qin Huaiyuan asked, which lesson? Qin Yining smiled and said, you taught the crown prince the meaning of benevolence. Qin Huaiyuan heard this and laughed loudly. It was clear that this little girl used the crown prince's presence to checkmate him. She knew that he was a teacher, so he naturally couldn't kill a servant in front of the crown prince. Thus, she saved Bidong and Xiao Ai's lives. At this moment, she was actually able to say these words with such eloquence. Qin Huaiyuan couldn't restrain his laughter. He patted Qin Yining's shoulder and said, Sister Yi's skill of flattering has reached perfection. Seeing her son so happy, the old madam also laughed. In recent years, it was rare for Qin Huaiyuan to laugh so heartily like this. Moreover, after carefully pondering Qin Yining's words, the old madam was surprised to find that Qin Yining had already thought about all kinds of reactions when she did things. She was also very accurate in criticizing the current situation. She was indeed her precious eldest son's daughter. The old madam hugged Qin Yining, tapped the tip of her nose, and said, You naughty monkey. You obviously did bad things, but you can still say these things. This time, Sister Hui was wrong first. It's fine if you do this, but you're not allowed to do this in the future. Grandmother's lesson is right. Granddaughter will remember it. Of course, she wouldn't use tricks to harm innocent people. However, when she was bullied, there was no reason for her to swallow her anger. Qin Huaiyuan laughed and felt that the depression in his chest had dissipated. After understanding Qin Yining's ability, he also had new thoughts about her future arrangements. He wouldn't marry a stupid girl to a place where people needed to cheat each other. Because, even if she had a high status, her life wouldn't be happy. If things went wrong, the girl might even lose her life. However, she was intelligent and good at judging the situation. She must be placed in an important position. Mother, you must be tired today. Rest early. Son and daughter-in-law will take our leave first. We'll come to see you tomorrow. Qin Huaiyuan stood up. The Sun clan still hadn't recovered from the shock just now. When they saw Qin Huaiyuan stand up and salute, they were stunned for a moment before they reacted and saluted as well. When the old madam saw the Sun clan's reaction, she knew that her son would have to spend a lot of effort to persuade them. She sighed and waved her hand, saying, You two can go. After Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan left, Qin Yining smiled and said, Presumably, the people who are moving are almost done with their work. Granddaughter will also take her leave. She was leaving some space for the old madam to rest. The old madam nodded and let her go back to settle down. Mammy Qin smiled and helped the old madam to lie down. She said, Old madam, you don't have any more worries, right? The old madam lay on her back and looked at the 5 fortunes of longevity on the mosquito net. She sighed and said, In this family, there's always one good and one bad. 2 people are always pulling each other. It's like this in the eldest branch, and it's also like this in the 2nd branch and 3rd branch. I'm old now. I really don't have the strength to care so much. Mammy Qin smiled and said, How is the old madam old? This servant still wants to stay by your side and serve you for another 50 years. The old madam burst into laughter. 50 years. Won't the two of us become old demons? After laughing, she said, speaking of moving, how is Sister Hui doing? Mammy Chin thought for a moment and said strategically, Miss Huining is fine. It's just that she's feeling unwell. She's probably crying in Snow Pear Courtyard right now. However, everything around her has been arranged properly. This servant asked Go family's servant to be the housekeeper. In addition, I've chosen Fugue and Kaiyun, the two head maidservants by your side, to serve her first. Tomorrow, the maidservants will arrive. Then, I'll choose the best ones for Miss Huining. The old madam nodded and said, Go family's servant is a dutiful person. I hope she can be well behaved and persuade Sister Hui. I used to think that Sister Hui was very sensible. Why is it that now? AI. Mammy Chin smiled and comforted the old madam, coaxing her to rest. Meanwhile, Chin Yining had already brought the people around her to the master's study. She also specially invited Mama Jean to stay with them. Chapter 61. The Shuoran house was located in the north, facing the south. Behind it was a sea of flowers and facing the bamboo garden. The emerald green Rue door was hidden behind the bamboo forest path. Even before entering the courtyard, one could feel the tranquility and comfort. The group of people pushed open the door and entered. What entered their eyes was the same bamboo forest. Walking along a small path paved with bluestones, they arrived at the Shuoran house. There were 5 two-story lofts, and a walkway wrapped around the entire bamboo garden of the Shuoran house, leading all the way to the back room. This is indeed the place where First Master once lived. Just by looking at the tranquil scenery, it's already extraordinary. Nanny Jean could not help but exclaim, the palace also has such a place, but it's not for people to live in. It's for nobles to enjoy their daily lives. The palace is splendid, so the nobles are just looking for some fun. Qin Yining did not dare to compare his own house with the palace. Nanny Jean nodded approvingly. The sky was already dark. Someone lit a lamp in the corridor. Because of Qin Huayuan's orders, the entire courtyard had already been cleaned. After Qin Yining checked both upstairs and downstairs, he assigned the living quarters. The servants of the errands lived in the back room. Qin Yining's room was in the middle of the second floor. The first room on the left was for Nanny Jean, the second room was for Yao Qin and Yu Qi, the first room on the right was for Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu, and the second room was for Zhu Mama and Lu Ya. The layout of the first floor was much more spacious. On the left and right sides of the main hall, there were 2 floor ceilings in the shape of aquariums, separating the 5 rooms. The floor ceilings were newly changed with a light green gauze curtain. All the furnishings in the room were complete. There was even a red coral bonsai on top of the treasure pavilion. It looked graceful and luxurious. Qin Yining ordered someone to bring over the registration booklet and gave it to Qiu Lu with a smile. As he walked towards the innermost study on the east side, he said, I'll leave the storeroom to you in the future. Qiu Lu took it and nodded, Don't worry, Mississippi. I always keep the key with me. The study was very spacious. There was a large mahogany painting table in the middle of the room. On the painting table, there was a blue and white porcelain brush holder with all kinds of brushes. Some of them were bald. A simple inkstone was placed at the corner of the painting table. The clear water in the white porcelain brush washer seemed to have been added recently. There were also some scrolls in the porcelain vat on the ground. They were probably Qin Huayuan's old works. Qin Yining sat on a round chair covered with a thick mattress behind the painting table. She leaned against the bookshelf that was stuffed to the ceiling and took a deep breath. She smiled and said. Bing Tang nodded and pointed at the half-used ink. This ink is fragrant. Li. Bing Tang proudly said, I've been practicing since I was young. I can smell some herbs mixed in medicine. Qin Yining nodded and sighed, living in a big house, how can I not have some skills? It's time for me to learn from Sir. Then he said to Yao Qin, I just saw a guqin hanging on the wall in the western room. Yao Qin Jijia is a good player. I want to take you as my master. Yao Qin smiled, this servant's skills are insignificant. If Miss likes it, I can teach you. Jijia's skills are outstanding. There's no need to be modest. Qin Yining looked at Yu Qi, also, I'm a complete layman when it comes to playing chess. I'd like to ask Yu Qi Jijia to teach me. Miss is too kind. This servant will do her best. Yu Qi happily agreed. After arranging everything, Qin Yining told everyone to have a rest. Qin Yining returned to his bedroom and sat in front of the dressing table to take off his hair. Then he washed his face with Song Lan's help. He changed into a set of pajamas and lay down. It's been a long day. I'm so tired. It's even more tiring than hunting. Today was Song Lan's night. She laid out the bedding on the Arhat bed facing the window in the outer room and only left a lamp on. She put on a small jacket and let her hair down. She helped Qin Yining put down the light purple muslin bed curtain. Miss, you won a great victory today. It's no different from fighting a war. How can you not be tired? Song Lan was now full of gratitude and admiration for Qin Yining. Her tone was much more gentle and respectful than before. Qin Yining covered her mouth and yawned. She wrapped herself in the quilt and slept on her side like a warm and fragrant jade. She muttered, Song Lan, you should also sleep. Your injury hasn't healed yet. Song Lan smiled and said through the curtain, yes, this servant will watch over Mississippi Miss should sleep. Since Qin Yining moved to the master's study, her life became busier. In addition to the daily necessities for Old Madam and the Sun Clan, she learned the rules from Nanny Jean with her sisters in the morning. In the afternoon, she had to study with the teacher. When she was free, she had to practice writing characters. She had to learn how to play the zither and play chess with Yao Qin and Yu Qi. She also had to learn needlework from Song Lan and Bing Tang. She was so busy that she even had to calculate her lunch break. Although she was busy, Qin Yining was very happy. In the past, she was busy making a living. She would be happy after eating her fill. How could she have the time to learn these things? Now that she didn't have to worry about food and clothing, she didn't want to waste her time. She was so busy that she turned into a spinning top. She originally had a photographic memory. As long as she put her mind to it, it was easy to learn. Therefore, in just 1.5 months, she had made great progress. Seeing Qin Yining working so hard, Nanny Jean, as a bystander, was moved by her positive attitude. She couldn't help but teach her more in private. Qin Yining benefited a lot and was very grateful to Nanny Jean. In the blink of an eye, it was Laba. Qin Yining woke up early and was pressed by Bing Tang to apply some white ointment with a medicinal smell to her face. Then, he applied some light green ointment to her palms and the back of her hands to remove scars. She was told to lie down for a quarter of an hour before washing her face. Bing Tang said, the scars on Mrs. hands are almost healed. In the future, it will be enough if you continue to use Redding to moisturize your hands. Qin Yining lay on the chaise lounge, closed her eyes and moved her mouth slightly. I also feel that the skin on my hands has become tender. In the past, my skin was rough and thick, and it didn't hurt when I was pricked by a needle. Last night, when I was learning how to use needles with Song Lan, I accidentally pricked my hands. I even felt it when it didn't bleed. Song Lan and Chiu Lu came in with hot water and a brocade handkerchief. When they heard what she said, they laughed. Miss, you still say that your skin is rough and thick. Now your skin is as tender as tofu. Yesterday, Huining, Mrs. Servant, Fu Gue, secretly asked us what Miss used to smooth her face. Bing Tang laughed and said, then how did elder sister answer? Song Lan said, I said, Miss uses the rose redding that is given to us every month. Miss is the Grand Preceptor's daughter, and you take after him. It's natural for you to be beautiful. When you go home, you eat well and live well, so your skin is naturally good. Bing Tang nodded. Yes, I won't tell them. They don't have good intentions towards Mississippi Huining. Miss has already gone to Snow Pear Courtyard, so why don't you learn to behave? Qin Yining, however, was deep in thought. After a quarter of an hour, she washed her hands and face with warm water. After applying the redding, Qin Yining said to Bing Tang, isn't it a pity that you only use such good craftsmanship on me? Have you ever thought of selling the scar-removing cream you concocted? Bing Tang was stunned. He blinked and said, it's my family's craftsmanship. I don't want to spread it to outsiders. You can only make it into medicine. You can also slightly change the prescription to weaken its effect. If you use 3 boxes of scars that can be cured with 1 box, people will fight to buy it. Now that the country is in turmoil, we don't know what will happen in the future. You have to have money with you to be safe. Although I have money, I won't leave you behind. However, your identity is special, so you have to be prepared. Bing Tang thought for a while and nodded seriously. I know Miss is wholeheartedly thinking for me. Let me think about it. There's no need to rush. If you want to do this small business, I'll ask Master Zhong to help you contact some people. You just have to focus on making the ointment. In fact, you can not only make the ointment, but you can also mix the scar removal and beautifying ingredients into the redding that you use to wipe your face or into your rouge. It's a woman's nature to want to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be immediately effective. It will slowly take effect. There will be a lot of noble ladies and young ladies in the capital who are willing to spend money. Song Lan and Qiu Lu both nodded. They pulled Bing Tang and said, Miss is right. If you have this ability, why don't you earn some money? Bing Tang thought about his noble father. The end result of being noble was the destruction of the Tang family. He didn't hold back anymore. He smiled and said, then Miss, help me contact some people. We'll split the money when we get it. I don't want your money. If the business is successful, I'll use your money to wipe my face in the future. Qin Yining tapped Bing Tang's round apple face. She smiled and went to let Song Lan comb her hair. Bing Tang looked at Qin Yining's back and smiled gratefully. She naturally wanted to eat laba congee. Diane also had the habit of sending congee to laba congee. Qin Yining had just arrived at Ci Shao Garden. He hadn't even entered the house when he heard happy laughter coming from inside. The sweet smell of laba congee wafted through the air. He smiled and handed his cloak to Song Lan. Qin Yining entered the inner room and bowed to the matriarch, the Sun Clan, 2nd Madam, and 3rd Madam. The matriarch smiled and said, Sister Yi, you're here. Come and try the congee sent by the Eastern Palace. Eastern Palace. That's right. The Crown Prince was now a student of Qin Huaiyuan. They would naturally send him congee during the Laba festival. 3rd Madam flattered, we have eldest uncle's good fortune. Not everyone can eat the laba congee from the Eastern Palace. This way, when I return to my maternal family one day, I'll have something to show off. 2nd Madam smiled but didn't say anything. The matriarch laughed heartily at 3rd Madam's teasing. At this moment, the head maidservant Ji Xiang quickly walked in and bowed. Matriarch, the granny at the 2nd gate just came to pass a message. She said that first master's servant, Chitai, came to inform us that the Chow family sent congee. Her words made the matriarch feel uneasy. The Chow family had no dealings with their family. Why would they suddenly send Laba Kanji? Chapter 62. The Dowager Duchess leaned forward and asked, "You said that only me, your eldest aunt, and Sister Yi will be coming?" Her tone was full of nervousness. "Yes." Qin Yu said, "Eldest uncle is currently receiving the eunuch from the palace. He said that he will be back soon and asked you, eldest aunt, and Sister Yi to prepare yourselves." The Dowager Duchess frowned and nodded. Qin Yu left after passing the message. When he reached the outer room, he said to his wife, "The Yao clan, Sister Yi hasn't entered the palace before. As her sister-in-law, you should give her some advice." The eldest mistress smiled and nodded, "Don't worry, I understand." After watching Qin Yu leave, she pulled the second mistress, the Meng clan, and said, "Let's go. Madam will serve the Dowager Duchess while we go help Sister Yi." The second mistress put down the embroidery she had just taught Ji Xiang and entered the room with the eldest mistress. At this moment, the atmosphere in the room was calm. The old madam's brows were furrowed into a knot. She stroked her chest and said, "I keep feeling that something bad is going on today. Putting aside the fact that the Chow family sent us the Laba Kanji out of the blue, I don't know how that Empress Chow managed to persuade the emperor to let us 3 women enter the palace." The Sun clan was also nervous. Although she was a first-rank titled madam and had seen the world, she still felt her hands and feet go cold in front of the emperor and empress. She reckoned that she wouldn't be able to speak properly in front of them. "Dowager Duchess, why don't we let Master accompany us?" The Dowager Duchess shook her head. "Didn't you see that I specifically asked? The Emperor and Empress only let the 3 of us go. Brother Meng isn't included, so how can we go without being summoned?" "Forget it, we'll know whether it's good or bad when we see it." Seeing that the Dowager Duchess and the Sun clan looked as if they were facing a great enemy, Qin Yining smiled and explained. "Grandmother, mother, don't worry. My father's status is different now, so entering the palace shouldn't be a big problem. But if there's a sudden summons, there will only be 2 things, reward or punishment. We didn't do anything wrong, so naturally, we won't be punished." Everyone in the room had no idea what to do, but when they heard Qin Yining's logical analysis, they felt as if they had seen light in their hearts. Only the members of the Sun clan said worriedly, "But we still have a grudge with the Chow clan. Your Majesty is wise and mighty. As long as the small disagreements between the officials do not involve the foundation of the country, how could they be used as arguments? Besides, Her Majesty the Empress is the motherly model of the world, so she definitely won't complicate matters for her own personal grudges." When Qin Yining said that he was singing praises, he actually meant one thing. Even if the Demon Empress had given pillow talk to the incapable emperor, if she went to make things difficult for a loyal official's womenfolk without any evidence, it would only be a slap in the face and be laughed at by the world. The emperor and the empress still cared about their reputation. Sister Yi is right, Qin Huayuan just happened to come back at this time. When he entered the room, he didn't take off his cloak and comforted the old madam. "You don't have to worry. At present, there are no changes in the imperial court, and our family's position is stable. You just have to be cautious and act according to the situation. If there are any changes, don't accept the emperor and empress's orders in front of them. Just say that you want to go home and think about it. You are the old emperor, and the emperor advocates ruling the world with filial piety, so he won't make things difficult for you." With her son's words, the old madam had a backbone, so she nodded repeatedly. Qin Huayuan then turned to the members of the Sun clan and said, "When you enter the palace, just follow your mother." His meaning was to say less, make less mistakes, and don't act on your own. The members of the Sun clan nodded. Looking at his daughter, Qin Huayuan's eyes were overflowing with love. Sister E, when you enter the palace, be smart and serve your grandmother and mother well. Yes. Qin Yining nodded with a smile. Among these three people, the old madam was experienced, and Qin Yining was intelligent and sharp. Only the members of the Sun clan were restless. However, the Sun clan probably wouldn't dare to act rashly in front of the Emperor and Empress, so Qin Huayuan was very relieved. After giving a few instructions, Qin Huayuan busily went out again. From beginning to end, he didn't look at Qin Huaining. When Qin Huayuan entered the room, Qin Huaining deliberately walked to a conspicuous spot. At this time, her head was lowered and her teeth were tightly clenched. Jealousy and anger were about to incinerate her. The old madam relaxed and ordered Mammy Qin to prepare the clothes. Sister E has never entered the palace before. Have you prepared the oversized clothes that need to be made? Mammy Qin frowned and said, not yet. I ordered the people in the sewing room to rush the work, but the embroidery is complicated and will take some effort. Originally, this servant only wanted to wear it when entering the palace on New Year's Eve, so this servant ordered them to make it more carefully and not be anxious. Who knew that it would be brought forward by so many days? The young mistress looked at Qin Huaining, who had her head lowered and didn't say anything, and said with a smile, what's so difficult about this? I see that Sister E and Sister Hui are about the same size. Why don't we use Sister Hui's oversized clothes first and let Sister E use them? The young mistress's words were actually meant to disgust Qin Huaining. She had long disliked Qin Huaining's pitiful appearance, but her heart was full of schemes. She was just like the concubine-born daughters of her maternal family. Qin Huaining, who didn't have much of a presence, was called out. Everyone's gaze fell on her. Qin Huaining wore a light green plain satin robe today and didn't have any jewelry on her head. Although her plain and quiet appearance didn't make her look like she was wearing mourning clothes, it still made people feel unhappy on a day like the Laba festival. Her sisters and sisters-in-law all knew that Qin Huaining loved to dress like this. It wasn't like they didn't give her any jewelry or rouge, but she insisted on acting like she was treated poorly. At this time, she raised her head, and her eyes were glistening. She held the handkerchief in one hand and looked apologetically at the old madam. Grandmother, my clothes just happened to be starched. I didn't know that I would need it today. Moreover, Sister E is taller than me, so I'm afraid that she won't be able to wear it. The emperor had specifically asked her to enter the palace, but only she was excluded from the womenfolk of the eldest branch. This already made her lose face. When her father came back, he didn't even look at her. What, he didn't let her go and even wanted her to take out clothes for Qin Yining to wear. It was simply a dream. The old madam frowned unhappily. I think Sister E doesn't need to be so troublesome. Didn't I just get a light pink Sichuan brocade with small peach blossoms on it and gave it to Sister E? That one should be done, right? Qin Yining nodded and said, it's already done and sent over. Then wear that one. A little girl should wear pink and tender. Only this way will she be likable. After the old madam made the final decision, the eldest and second young mistresses pulled Qin Yining back to Shuorenjai to help her change her clothes. Qin Huaining was already on the verge of tears. Her palms were scratched by her fingernails and traces of blood stained the handkerchief. The old madam's words just now, wasn't she disdaining her for wearing too plain clothes? She had fallen out of favor so quickly. How much did the old madam dote on her in the past? She even hugged her and said something like, no matter what happens in the future, grandmother will cherish you. But now, sure enough, she wasn't her biological daughter. These people began to humiliate her one by one. Even the old madam's heart was biased to the point of no return. Qin Huaining lowered her head and 2 drops of tears fell on her lapel. The old madam frowned as she watched. When Qin Yining was actively studying, Qin Huaining only knew to eat snacks and read novels. Qin Yining and the sisters were harmonious and never stirred up trouble. Qin Huining was only close to 6th young miss and didn't get along well with others. In the past, Qin Yining didn't complain at all when she lived in Snow Pear Courtyard. She also didn't do anything to show off when she moved to Shuorenjai. However, when Qin Huining lived in Ci Shao Garden, she often used this to show off and provoke the other sisters. Now that she lived in Snow Pear Courtyard, she still complained and was dissatisfied. She deliberately gave her the cold shoulder for a few days to see her reaction. She made this appearance now, as if the family Qin treated her harshly. In any case, her every move was sowing discord. The old madam was a wily old fox who had mingled in the inner residence. Once she put aside the emotions of doting and cherishing, she could see more clearly than anyone else. Now, she didn't care much about Qin Huining. She ordered everyone to disperse. The old madam and the Sun clan also went to prepare. Not long after, the three of them were ready. They rode the oil wall carriage out of the second gate and boarded the spacious and warm Zhu Luanhua carriage. The carriage traveled quickly and steadily. Soon, they arrived in front of the palace gates. The imperial bodyguards inspected the carriage and then the eunuchs led the three of them to change carriages. They went all the way to the Empress Soaring Phoenix Palace. Qin Yining had studied with Jean Momo for many days. She had also learned the rules of the palace. Therefore, when she got off the carriage, she obediently lowered her head and didn't dare to look around. The palace wasn't the Fu. The slightest misstep could be used against her. If she made a mistake, she would implicate the entire family. Qin Yining didn't dare to overstep her boundaries. Passing through the spacious courtyard paved with limestone, they walked up a red staircase and arrived in front of Soaring Phoenix Palace. A eunuch went in to report. Not long after, a eunuch came out with a smile. "Old Madam, Madam Qin, Miss Qin, please enter. The Emperor and Empress are both here." The three of them straightened their appearance and bowed as they entered the hall. They followed the eunuch's footsteps to the side hall. As soon as they entered, the sweet scent of lilies entered their nostrils. It made Qin Yining frown slightly. The floor was covered with a thick and luxurious peony carpet. The three of them knelt in the distance and paid their respects. The old madam loudly sang, "This old one, Qin Gu, brings her daughter-in-law from the Sun clan and her granddaughter from the Qin clan to greet the Emperor and Empress. We wish the Emperor 10,000 years and 10,000 blessings, and the Empress a healthy phoenix body. Rise." The one who spoke was a sweet and lazy female voice. Qin Yining was very familiar with this voice. It was the voice of the person she saw at Xiangu Temple that day. She couldn't help but rejoice. Fortunately, the Gongzi had quick reflexes and pulled her back that day. Otherwise, it would be even more troublesome to meet today. The Emperor's voice had the hoarseness of an elderly person. "Today, in private, there is no need to stand on ceremony. The Empress's words are my words. You are all Qin Meng's family members, so you are one of us. There is no need to be overly courteous. Many thanks to the Emperor and Empress." The old madam brought the Sun clan and Qin Yining to pay their respects. After the proper etiquette, the three of them stood up. Because their heads were lowered, they didn't dare to raise their heads to look directly at the Emperor's face. Therefore, they could only see from the corners of their eyes that there were not only the Emperor, Empress, and palace servants in the hall. There were also a few outsiders, and there seemed to be a man. The Empress smiled. "Miss Qin, come to Ben Gong and let Ben Gong take a good look." The old madam and the Sun clan's hearts skipped a beat. Qin Yining was a bit nervous, but since she was already here, she could only accept it and slowly walked forward with lowered eyes. Chapter 63. The Empress had summoned the womenfolk of this subject's family, and among the womenfolk, there were unmarried girls. Shouldn't she send away an irrelevant man? What did this mean? Qin Yining thought as she walked. A man who could appear in the Empress's palace in front of the Emperor must be someone close to the Emperor and Empress. It was very likely that he was a relative of the Empress. This subject's daughter from the Qin clan pays respect to the Emperor and the Empress. Qin Yining's thoughts flashed through her mind as she gracefully bowed. She had been learning from Mama Zhan for so many days, so she had already formed the habit of etiquette. Not only was her etiquette standard, but her bearing was also very pleasing to the eye. The Empress's slender eyebrows rose, and her peach blossom eyes were filled with curiosity. She stretched out her right hand, which was wearing a 3 cun long golden armor, and raised it slightly. You may rise. Thank you, Nyang Nyang. Qin Yining stood up, but her head was still lowered. The Empress smiled and said, Emperor, look at how good Dowager Qin is at taking care of people. How long has it been? She's already taken care of a girl who grew up in the mountains. Qinxia likes her just from looking at her. This girl's appearance is really beautiful. It's always been said that family Qin produces beauties. Looking at her now, isn't it true? The Emperor smiled and nodded. Yuro is right. Zhen sees that this girl has a bit of Qin Meng's character when he was young. What's your name? How old are you? Raise your head and answer, Zhen. Upon hearing this, Qin Yining answered with a yes. She raised her head, but her long eyelashes were still lowered. She didn't look directly at the Empress's face as she replying to the Emperor, this subject's name is Yining. I'm 14 years old. The Emperor and Empress sized up Qin Yining. The girl in front of him was tall and slender. Her facial features were exquisite. Her skin was fair and tender, and her hair was inky black. She was so beautiful that she seemed to have walked out of a painting. She stood in front of him seriously, looking very steady. However, she was still young, and there was a pure and childish air about her. She was really an extremely likable little girl. I watched Qin Meng grow up to be like this. More than 20 years ago, I was still thinking that if Qin Meng was a girl, what kind of beauty would she be? I didn't expect to see such a girl today. Ha ha ha. The Emperor slapped his thigh and laughed loudly. The Empress squinted her peach blossom eyes at Qin Yining. Old Madam and the Sun clan were so nervous that their palms were sweating. The Emperor's words could be interpreted as a joke to Qin Meng, but it could also be interpreted as another layer of meaning. This man was almost 70 years old. Wasn't it enough that he had an extremely charming Empress? Could it be that he had taken a fancy to a 14-year-old girl like Qin Yining? If Qin Yining entered the palace, he would probably be chewed up by the Empress in less than 2 days. Old Madam hurriedly said with a smile, Yes, I didn't expect that so many years would pass in a flash. Your Majesty is in the prime of your life. You are diligent and love the people. My son is also loyal to you. I am very grateful for the monarch and minister relationship between you and my son. Your Majesty's kindness to my son. The Emperor was a little moved by Old Madam's words. He was old, and in recent years, he often fell into some memories. Old Madam Qin's words made him not only recall 20 years ago, when he was still in the prime of his life. At that time, the imperial court was not as chaotic as it was now. Thinking of this, the Emperor's smile was a little warm. Seeing that Old Madam Qin was so eloquent, the Empress chuckled and said, Your Majesty, Grand Preceptor Qin is loyal to the country. Your Majesty should reward Grand Preceptor Qin. A 14-year-old girl can also talk about marriage. I want to be a matchmaker for Miss Qin. Your Majesty, please see if it is suitable. The Emperor patted the back of the Empress's hand with his big hand. Which family's son is the Empress talking about? First of all, family Qin's girl is so beautiful. If she is not good enough for him, I will not allow it. The Empress smiled and stretched out her hand to the side. June, come here. Aunt. A clear and melodious voice came from the side. It was the 18 or 19-year-old boy who had been standing by the side. The Empress smiled and said, Your Majesty, this time you can't say that I don't choose the right person. My nephew is 19 years old. He is also a talented person. He is also a relative. It can be said that the marriage between him and Grand Preceptor Qin is well matched. The Emperor nodded with a smile and looked at Chao Qingjun. Chao Qingjuan's eyes fell on Qin Yining beside him in a daze. He murmured, When I saw the figure, I knew it was a beauty. Qin Yining frowned and took 2 steps back. Chao Qingjun chased after him and said with a smile, You are called Yining, right? My aunt is right. We are a talented man and a beautiful woman. We are a match made in heaven. Since it is like this, let's get married immediately. When I go home later, I will dismiss all my concubines. As he said this, he grabbed Qin Yining's hand. If it was in normal times, if someone dared to treat her like this, Qin Yining would definitely break the lecher's wrist. He dared to flirt with the daughter of a court official in front of the emperor just because he was the demon empress nephew. But Qin Yining's mind turned at lightning speed, and he made up his mind. She stepped back in a panic and looked at Chao Qingjun in horror. What are you doing? Big drops of tears gushed out in an instant. She cried like a pear blossom in the rain. She turned around and hid behind old Madam. Grandmother, I am scared. I don't want to marry a man. Why don't you let me become a nun? The little girl was calm and elegant just now, but she was scared to cry like this by the lecher. She hid behind old Madam and didn't dare to come out. She looked like a frightened little rabbit. Chao Qingjuan's heart jumped when he saw this. He quickly lowered his head. The emperor stared at Chao Qingjun and scolded, Impudent, you still haven't stepped back. Chao Qingjun came back to his senses. He stepped back to his parents with a pale face. The Empress's smile was a bit stiff, but her voice was more delicate. Your Majesty, look at how well matched these 2 children are. They just met and they like something. June must really like this child. That's why she lost her composure like this. Chao Qingjun didn't forget to nod and agree. Yes, such a beauty. My soul almost flew away when I saw her. I think after a few years she will become a great beauty that can cause the downfall of a city. The Empress's face stiffened. She gritted her teeth and glared at her brother and sister-in-law. Chao Qingjun immediately shut up. The emperor's face was also not good. Even if he wanted to appoint a marriage, if he didn't pay attention and appointed an unharmonious marriage, then the emperor was deceived. It couldn't be considered the emperor's fault. However, it was obvious that Chao Qingjun was a foppish lecher. He was only 19 years old, but he already had a bunch of concubines at home. Moreover, he didn't know how to do things properly and his words were rude. He even dared to take liberties with Grand Preceptor Qin's daughter in front of the emperor. The little girl was so scared that she cried and said she wanted to become a nun. After such a disturbance, the emperor couldn't issue any more edicts. The emperor's face was as calm as water. Old Madam hugged Qin Yining and gently comforted him. Qin Yining still buried his face in old Madam's shoulder and sobbed. In the quiet hall, only the girl's suppressed sobs could be heard. The Sun Clan was so nervous that sweat appeared on her forehead. Her thoughts were different from old Madam's. At this moment, she was in front of the Emperor and Empress. She was usually domineering in the residence like a tyrant. How could she be so scared to cry like this after being scolded by a few words? If she cried like this in front of the Emperor and made the Emperor and Empress unhappy, then it would be troublesome. The Sun Clan couldn't help but fiercely pinch Qin Yining's arm and scolded in a low voice, still crying. Qin Yining's body trembled in pain. He knew that the Sun Clan would have this kind of reaction. In any case, the Sun Clan didn't dare to be impudent in front of the Emperor. Qin Yining simply sobbed even louder. A proper meeting with the Emperor was ruined by Chao Qingjun taking liberties with a little girl. The Emperor's good mood was completely ruined. He reprimanded Chao Qingjun and had everyone leave. Once everyone left, the Emperor rebuked, "Can't your family handle such a small matter? You said that you would find a suitable person for me and that this marriage would definitely be successful. But what kind of thing did your family send over? You dare to be so impudent in front of me. It's obvious how impudent you are on a daily basis. Qin Meng only has one daughter. It would be strange if he agreed. I am a wise ruler, not a fatuous one. Do you want me to force them to marry? That little girl is so scared. If she really hangs herself and becomes a nun, then a group of people will misunderstand me." The Empress hurriedly patted the Emperor's chest and apologized, "Your Majesty, please calm down. This concubine was negligent. This concubine has been by your Majesty's side for so many years and rarely sees the relatives at home. I only remember that Jun was smart when he was young. I didn't expect him to become like this when he grew up. This concubine was negligent, but this concubine had no choice. This concubine wasn't at home and couldn't always attend to my parents. It's rare for us to see each other every year." She was originally apologizing to the Emperor, but as she spoke, she started sobbing. The Emperor's heart ached and his attention was diverted. He immediately hugged the Empress, darling and sweetheart, and coaxed her. On the other side, Chao Guizhou and his wife brought their son out of the palace and changed into their family's carriage. The three of them let out a long sigh of relief. Chao Guizhou gave his youngest son a thumbs up and said in a low voice, "You're really quick-witted today." Chao Qingjun laughed in a low voice and said softly, "It's a pity. Although I was impulsive, what I said was the truth. She really is a beauty." Chao Guizhou said, "Not to mention a beauty, even if she's a fairy, this marriage can't happen. Your grandfather may be muddle-headed, but your father isn't. I've already asked around in private. Do you know where today's matter came from?" Chao Guizhou's wife and Chao Qingjun both looked at him questioningly. Chao Guizhou lowered his voice even more. "It's because the Empress placed someone in the Eastern Palace and found that His Highness the Crown Prince drew a painting of a beauty facing each other day and night. It's obvious that she was moved. After asking around, she found out that the person the Crown Prince drew was the legitimate daughter of Grand Preceptor Qin. No wonder." Chao Qingjun understood. No wonder he suddenly called us into the palace. The Emperor only had one son, the Crown Prince. He was already old and had ruled the country for half of his life. Naturally, he was unwilling to hand over his power. The relationship between the Emperor and the Crown Prince had been maintained at a subtle distance for many years, but secretly, there were other signs. If the Crown Prince and Grand Preceptor Qin's relationship went further, then it would be even harder to control in the future. That was why the Emperor wanted to marry Grand Preceptor Qin's daughter into the Chao family to make it easier for him to control the country. Chao Guizhou said, "The Empress is too naive. I think this country is doomed. Our family's roots aren't in the Dayan. We don't know what will happen in the future. How can we marry into the family now? When the time comes, it will be even more difficult to explain." Chapter 64. At this time, Qin Yining, Old Madam, and the Sun Clan were riding the palace's oil wall carriage to the palace gates to change carriages. Qin Yining was still covering her face and sobbing. She kept muttering, "I don't want to marry a lecher. If I'm betrothed to this person, I'll throw myself into the river." Although her voice wasn't loud, the eunuch driving the carriage outside certainly heard it clearly. The old madam was like an old monk in meditation and didn't say a word. When the Sun Clan heard this, she wished she could cover Chin Yining's mouth. In her heart, she had already cursed this damned girl who caused trouble thousands of times. She was like this when she was in front of the emperor, and she was still like this when she came out. She wanted to scold her, but because they were still in the palace and there were eunuchs following outside the carriage, she couldn't do anything. It wasn't until they reached the palace gates that the three of them changed into the luxurious carriage that they came in. The family Qin's loyal servant drove the carriage out of the palace's range that Qin Yining finally stopped, crying. The Sun Clan couldn't hold back her temper anymore and scolded, "You damned ignorant wench. You're like Sun Wukong in the Fu. If you were given a stick, you could overturn the house. How come when someone outside scolded you, you dared to cry in front of the emperor? If the emperor or the empress blamed you, who can bear the responsibility? Do you want to harm our family or what?" Qin Yining hurriedly smiled and held the Sun Clan's arm to let her sit down. She smiled and said, "Mother, don't worry. Listen to your daughter's explanation." "Explain my ass. You've already cried. If the emperor wants to blame you, he might already bear a grudge. What's the use of your explanation? I think your father shouldn't have asked you to come back. Our family's originally peaceful days were messed up by you." Qin Yining was still smiling, but the smile in her eyes gradually faded. Although she understood the Sun Clan's temperament and didn't want to bicker with them, she would often be hurt by the Sun Clan's occasional words. However, the Sun Clan was her mother. If she didn't protect her, was she going to watch her mother-in-law reprimand her? Qin Yining's smile widened as he said, "Mother, don't be angry. Listen to me, I was crying on purpose just now. I was the one being teased by that lecher. If I didn't take the opportunity to cry and make a scene, I'm afraid that His Majesty would have betrothed me to the Chow family." The Sun Clan was stunned, and their arrogance immediately diminished. She was just angry that Qin Yining cried in front of the emperor, but she didn't want Qin Yining to marry such a lecher. After thinking about it carefully, she realized that her reprimand of her daughter was unreasonable. Could it be that Qin Yining didn't cry or make a fuss and waited for the emperor to grant her a marriage was a good thing? The Sun Clan came back to their senses and coughed awkwardly. Old Madam rolled her eyes in dissatisfaction. Qin Yining continued to explain, "I'm not being picky about the marriage, but I still don't know father's intentions. How could I carelessly agree to this matter?" Qin Yining's heart was like a mirror. Her marriage was bound to be an alliance marriage, and the marriage partner must be someone who would be beneficial to Qin Huayuan. When she agreed to return to the family Qin, she had already thought of this. Which marriage of women in the world wasn't decided by their parents and matchmakers? Her father chose someone who would be beneficial to his career, but to her, it was no different. In any case, wasn't it the same who she married? At this time, the Sun Clan came back to their senses. She didn't expect that while she was worried, Qin Yining had already thought so much. It was no wonder that her mother said that Qin Yining could see things clearly and wanted her to ask for Qin Yining's opinion. Thinking about it carefully, last time she listened to Qin Yining's words and took the initiative to admit defeat in front of old Madam, Qin Huayuan not only didn't reprimand her, but also got along well with her. This time, Qin Yining could be so clear-headed and adapt to the situation when she met the emperor. The Sun Clan smiled with satisfaction and tapped Qin Yining's forehead. However, because she had scolded Qin Yining too harshly just now, she felt somewhat guilty and felt that as a mother, there was no reason for her to apologize to her daughter. "Yesterday, among the things that your eldest uncle asked someone to send to your maternal grandmother, there were 2 white fox furs. Your maternal grandmother asked someone to send it over. She said that it would be used as a fur collar when making oversized clothes for you. Later, I will ask Saiju to send it to you." Qin Yining knew that the Sun Clan was admitting defeat and expressing goodwill by saying this. She didn't care about the Sun Clan's words just now and didn't care that the fox furs weren't for her alone. She only smiled happily and said, "Many thanks, mother, and many thanks, maternal grandmother." When the Sun Clan saw that Qin Yining was beaming with joy as usual, they also liked her. These days, old Madam was used to seeing the mother and daughter like this and was already accustomed to it. However, in her heart, her love for Qin Yining increased a little. She wanted to reprimand the Sun Clan, but when she saw Qin Yining smiling and holding hands with the Sun Clan and the atmosphere was so good, old Madam couldn't open her mouth. The carriage went all the way back to Qin Manor. Just as it stopped in front of the manor's gate, several manservants came up to greet them. Qin Huayuan's personal attendant, Qi Tai, saluted and said, "Old Madam, First Madam, and Fourth Young Miss have returned. Grand Preceptor missed you and specially ordered this lowly one to wait here. This lowly one will go and report to Grand Preceptor." Old Madam supported Qin Yining and the Sun Clan subordinates to get off the carriage. She smiled and said, "Tell your master to go to Xi Shao Garden to talk. Just say that I have something important to tell him." Qi Tai bowed and complied. He waited on Old Madam, the Sun Clan, and Qin Yining to get on the small sedan chair. Only then did he go to the outer courtyard study to report. The group of people returned to Xingning Garden. Just as they took off their cloaks and sat down to drink hot tea, Qin Huayuan hurried over. Seeing Qin Huayuan come in, Qin Yining and the Sun Clan hurriedly stood up and saluted him. Qin Huayuan waved his hand and carefully looked at the three people's faces. When he saw that there was nothing unusual, he was slightly relieved. Qin Yining thought that Old Madam must have wanted to discuss the matter in the palace with Qin Huayuan, so he held the Sun Clan's arm and said, "Didn't Mother say that she had fox fur for me? I also want the pine nuts and osmanthus candy that Nanny Jean made. I will go to Xingning Garden with Mother now. Later, I will ask someone to send my food box over. Let's have lunch together, okay?" When Qin Yining asked, "Is it okay?" her voice was so soft that people couldn't bear to refuse her. The Sun Clan naturally liked their daughter to be close to them. They also wanted to make up for scolding the wrong person just now. They immediately nodded with a smile and turned to salute Old Madam and Qin Huayuan. "We will take our leave first." Old Madam nodded with a smile. She watched as the servants served the Sun Clan and Qin Yining put on their cloaks and went out. Old Madam's face sank and she said to Qin Huayuan, "Today, it was all thanks to Sister Yi's adaptability. Otherwise, the matter would have been unimaginable." Qin Huayuan sat down next to Old Madam and asked with a frown, "What happened?" Old Madam told Qin Huayuan everything that happened in the palace today, what everyone's expressions were like, and what they said. In the end, she said, "If Sister Yi hadn't cried and made a fuss on the spot, I'm afraid that the Emperor and Empress would have appointed a marriage on the spot. I think the Chao family doesn't have good intentions. Moreover, I feel that this matter isn't over yet. The Empress clearly holds a grudge against our family and wants to make an example out of Sister Yi." Qin Huayuan said, "I understand this matter. The Emperor only favors the Empress, so it's normal for him to listen to the Empress pillow talk. But why would the Emperor act like this?" Qin Huayuan stroked the smooth table with his fingers and pondered for a moment. He already understood. "I'm afraid it's because I became the Crown Prince's tutor. But why would the Emperor suddenly act like this? Did he plan this for a long time or did he do it on the spur of the moment?" Oh. Old Madam didn't know much about the matters of the imperial court, so she asked, "What's wrong with you becoming the Crown Prince's tutor? Is it worth the Emperor acting like this?" Qin Huayuan understood this, but he didn't want to tell his mother about this mess. It would only annoy the Old Madam, and it wouldn't be good if she fell ill. Therefore, he only smiled calmly and brought a cup of tea to the Old Madam. Mother, don't worry about it. Your son knows what to do and can handle it well. You just need to help your son look after the inner residents. Your son is already very grateful. The old madam laughed. You child, we're family. Why are you saying such things? As expected, her attention was diverted and she talked to Qin Huayuan about preparing for the new year. Qin Huayuan patiently accompanied the old madam to plan how to spend the little new year and how to arrange it afterward. He also accompanied the old madam to eat lunch together. After she rinsed her mouth, Mammy Qin came in with a smile and took the warm handkerchief that Qin Huayuan was going to use to wipe the old madam's hands. She smiled and teased, "Old madam, you're in such a good mood today. Is it because the grand tutor serves you better? Is this old servant inferior to him?" As she spoke, Mammy Qin gave Qin Huayuan a meaningful look from an angle that the old madam couldn't see. Qin Huayuan immediately understood that there was something going on outside. The old madam laughed heartily. "Lujuan, how old are you? You're still comparing yourself to Brother Mang." Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "Of course I can't compare to Mammy Qin. Mammy Qin has served Mother wholeheartedly and has been loyal and devoted her whole life. Even I, as your son, can feel at ease when I know that Mother is living happily at home when I'm busy outside. This old servant doesn't dare. It's this old servant's duty to serve the old madam." Mammy Qin turned around and saluted Qin Huayuan. However, she secretly gestured to him and silently said, "The crown prince is here." Qin Huayuan nodded with a smile and said, "Mother, take a nap at noon. This son still has things to do outside, so I'll go first." "Go ahead. I've delayed you for so long." Her son was a powerful official in the imperial court, so he must have a lot of things to deal with. She was already very satisfied that he could find time to accompany an old woman to talk about the New Year's arrangements and accompany her to eat lunch. Qin Huayuan respectfully saluted the old madam and retreated. After leaving the door of Ci Shao Garden, the head servant Chi Tai quickly walked over and whispered, "Master, the crown prince is here. He's wearing casual clothes and didn't bring any attendants. This lowly one thinks that the crown prince came quietly by himself. This lowly one didn't dare to make it public, so this lowly one arranged for him to have tea in the study." "Okay," Qin Huayuan responded. He thought that perhaps the crown prince's hurried arrival could solve the doubts in his heart. Chapter 65. When Qin Huayuan rushed to the study, Yu Qiyan was standing in the middle of the room with his hands behind his back. His eyes were down and he seemed to be thinking about something. Today, he was wearing a very ordinary light brown cotton robe. His hair was neatly tied up and he wore a black net scarf. He looked like a young master from an ordinary rich family, which was completely different from his usual elegant and noble appearance. It was enough to show how cautious he was when he came today. Qin Huayuan judged that Yu Qiyan might have discovered that there were spies around him. Hearing the footsteps, Yu Qiyan recovered from his thoughts. He turned to look at Qin Huayuan and bowed with a smile. "Grand Preceptor Qin." Qin Huayuan hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Your Highness." "Grand Preceptor Qin, you don't have to be so polite." Yu Qiyan held his hands and said with a smile, "I don't know if I'm disturbing you by coming here abruptly." "Your Highness, you don't have to say that. It's my honor to have you here. Does Your Highness have something important to say?" The two of them sat down on the round-backed chairs. Chi Tai served tea and closed the door considerately. He walked to the door of the courtyard and stood guard at a distance. Yu Qiyan frowned and said, "I did come here today for two important things. Prince Ning's people got the news from Xihua City that Dezhou is at war with us again. The battle has already started in Xihua City." Qin Huayuan heard this and frowned deeply. Xihua City was not far from the capital. It was also on an important port. Whether it was by land or by sea, Xihua City was an important transportation route. If Xihua City was breached, Dian's destruction would accelerate rapidly. Yu Qiyan saw Qin Huayuan's heavy expression and sighed helplessly. The two generals guarding Xihua City are both Grand Preceptor Qin's brothers-in-law. I don't know how they are now. The two brothers-in-law are devoted to the country. The day they guarded Xihua City, they were determined to die rather than submit. No matter what, we have a better chance of winning if we can defend Xihua City. Qin Huayuan frowned and said, "This news came just in time. Presumably, everyone in the court will know about it tomorrow. When the time comes, there will be another debate. We can also discuss countermeasures in advance." Yu Qiyan nodded and said somewhat helplessly, "What's the use of those people arguing? Do you think De Zhou is afraid of our curses? If cursing is useful, I'm willing to learn how to learn to curse every day. The most important thing is to defeat the Great Zhou. Prince Ning still wants to go to war, but Father Emperor won't allow it for now. He was of. But he was of the imperial families, to discuss to be. When they talked about politics, the two forgot the time. By the time everything was finished, the sky had darkened. Yu Qiyan wasn't someone who didn't know etiquette. He planned to take his leave. However, just as he stood up, Yu Qiyan remembered another important matter. He said awkwardly, "Dare I ask the Grand Preceptor, did my father summon the girls of the manor to the palace today?" The emperor had summoned 3 people, but the crown prince only mentioned girls. Qin Huayuan understood. There is such a thing. Why does the crown prince ask? Yu Qiyan said nervously, "Did father make things difficult for, reprimand the girls of the manor?" Qin Huayuan had been wondering why the emperor suddenly wanted to bestow a marriage to Qin Yining. Hearing the crown prince's question, he was even more certain of his guess. However, he didn't know what the crown prince had done to cause the emperor's fear. Qin Huayuan smiled and deliberately said in a relaxed tone, "To tell you the truth, the emperor and empress summoned my daughter today to bestow a marriage to her." Yu Qiyan was surprised. Then, joy appeared on his face. He asked anxiously, "Who does father want to bestow your daughter to?" Qin Huayuan said, "The empress said that her nephew and my daughter are a match made in heaven." Yu Qiyan's joy froze on his face. His face, which had been red a moment ago, turned pale. When his joy died down, he didn't let his imagination run wild. He also didn't hold on to fantasies that he shouldn't have. He thought about the whole situation. Suddenly, he slumped back into his chair and muttered, "In the end, I hurt others and myself." Qin Huayuan saw the crown prince like this. His heart skipped a beat. The crown prince was like this. Could it be that he and Sister Yi had already, impossible, they didn't have the chance to meet at all? He believed that the crown prince had taken a liking to Sister Yi the last time he saw her. After all, as men, they understood each other's natures best. Everyone loved beauty, and Sister Yi was so beautiful. However, they shouldn't have developed further. Why did the crown prince have such an expression? "Your Highness, please forgive this official's impudence." What exactly happened? This official doesn't understand why the emperor and empress suddenly wanted to bestow a marriage today. At this time, Yu Qiyan only thought that Qin Yining was going to be betrothed to Empress Chao's nephew. How could he have the mind to think about anything else? Disheartened, he said, "It's my fault. The last time I saw 4th young miss, I couldn't forget her. I went back and drew a portrait of her. Who knew that one of my eunuchs was sent by the empress and told her such a secret? I knew that she would make things difficult for me, but I didn't expect it to be like this. So it was like this." Qin Huayuan immediately understood the emperor's fear. Seeing the crown prince's despondent appearance, Qin Huaiyuan was both angry and amused. In reality, he really did like the person in front of him about Qin Yining's marriage. After all, even if he didn't marry the crown prince, their relationship was still there. It was better to let their relationship become closer. Moreover, although the crown prince didn't have any great political insight, he was a kind and honest person. He also had the spirit and gentleness of a scholar. If his daughter was to be with him, as long as he managed her well, her life wouldn't be difficult. The crown prince was also the heir to the throne. In the future, he would be the emperor. Qin Huaiyuan thought that even if Dian was in turmoil and Dezhou was fighting fiercely, the country wouldn't be destroyed in a short period of time, right? All of this was uncertain, and there was still room to work hard and turn things around. Thinking of this, Qin Huaiyuan smiled comfortingly at the crown prince. "Your Highness, I haven't finished speaking." Although the emperor intended to grant the marriage, that young master of the Chao family was rude in front of the emperor. His behavior was unbearable. He made my daughter cry out of shame and anger. She almost went to hang herself. Therefore, the marriage was cancelled. What? Yu Qiyan stood up and asked anxiously, "Is the fourth young miss all right?" As soon as he spoke, he met Qin Huaiyuan's slightly mocking gaze. The crown prince's face flushed red. However, it was too late for regrets. He had already expressed his feelings with what he said just now. Fortunately, he didn't have any scruples. "I won't hide it from you, Grand Preceptor. I fell in love with the fourth young miss at first sight. Please forgive my rudeness." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "Your Highness the Crown Prince has a pure and innocent heart. It is my daughter's fortune that you took a fancy to her." Hearing this, Yu Qiyan's eyes lit up with joy. "Grand Preceptor Qin, do you mean that you don't object to this marriage? The Crown Prince's favor is the fortune of 8 lifetimes. I can't thank you enough. How could I object?" Chapter 66. Qin Yining still didn't know that Qin Huaiyuan and the Crown Prince had decided her future with just a few words. She accompanied the Sun clan in the inner room to do needlework. Just as the atmosphere was warm and peaceful, she heard the Sun clan sigh. "Mother, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" Qin Yining hurriedly put down the needlework and got up to gently massage the Sun clan's back. The Sun clan had long gotten used to having Qin Yining by their side to serve them. Overall, they were very satisfied with this daughter of theirs. However, she had been with Qin Huaining for 14 years, so her feelings for her were much deeper than those for Qin Yining. She could tell that Qin Huaining and Qin Yining didn't get along. Sometimes, when Qin Huaining came, she would only bow and leave after seeing Qin Yining, as if she was avoiding Qin Yining. When Qin Yining wasn't around, Qin Huaining would always look at her with that kind of resentful gaze, which made her feel very uncomfortable. They were both her daughters, so why couldn't they get along? Why was it that other families could enjoy the happiness of a family, but she couldn't? "Sister Yi, I know you don't like Sister Hui, and Sister Hui sometimes does things in the wrong. However, we are still a family. The eldest branch only has you and Sister Hui. The two of you don't get along well, and I don't like it either." When Qin Yining heard the Sun clan say, "I know you don't like Sister Hui," she already felt displeased in her heart. However, she had always been patient, and she also knew that the Sun clan's temperament had always been like this. Therefore, she didn't bicker with her and only nodded obediently. "Yes, I'll listen to you. As long as Miss Huaining doesn't take the initiative to provoke or bully me, I won't take the initiative to target her." She was implying that every time, it was Qin Huaining who provoked her, and not her. Mother Jean smiled as she picked up the beauty hammer and took over the job of Qin Yining. In a gentle voice, she said, "Madam, don't make things difficult for 4th Mississippi. You can't blame fourth Miss for what happened these days. Our fourth young Miss took the initiative to express her goodwill, but Miss Huaning didn't appreciate it. Fourth young Miss is in a difficult position. Mother Jean was the wet nurse of the Sun clan, so her words carried a lot of weight. Moreover, her tone was gentle, and she had the intention of guiding him patiently. The members of the Sun clan naturally knew about this. They sighed and said, "We are all family. Let bygones be bygones. Sister Yi is the legitimate daughter, so she should act like one." Qin Yining smiled and nodded, "Yes, your daughter understands." Mother Jean also smiled and said, "This old servant will overstep my bounds. Our fourth young Miss is honest and generous. Just look at how she treats the people around her. This old servant will say that fourth young Miss's demeanor closely follows Madam's. You have always treated the servants who serve you well. Isn't fourth young Miss the same? Fourth young Miss wouldn't even harm a servant, so why would she take the initiative to provoke others? Madam, there is no such thing as not being allowed to retaliate after being bullied." Mother Jean hated Qin Huaning to the core. Qin Huaning's wet nurse, Mama Kai, was Mother Jin's niece. They weren't very close, but when Mama Kai was chased out of the Fu after being beaten 40 times with the cane because of Qin Huaning didn't even spare her a glance. She didn't even give her a single copper coin. It was as if Mama Kai wasn't her wet nurse and they didn't even know each other. This kind of behavior was truly chilling. A wet nurse was different from an ordinary servant. She breastfed Qin Huaning and accompanied her as she grew up. She spent more time with Qin Huaning than her biological mother. Mother Jean didn't have a good impression of Qin Huaning after seeing how cold-hearted she was. On the other hand, Ruelan, who had a high status in the Fu, had changed her name to Song Lan, but who didn't know about her past. Despite knowing that she was Ruelan, no one could do anything to her. No one even dared to mention the theft in front of her. This was because Song Lan had been wrongly accused. Her master had overturned the case for her. Song Lan also made a mistake and was chased out, but her master didn't forget her kindness. She spent a lot of money to save her life and even gave her an even greater honor when she returned. This way, no one would dare to bully her again. When the two of them were in a similar situation, the difference between them was obvious. It could be said that Mother Jean respected Qin Yining as much as she disrespected her in the past. When the Sun clan heard Mother Jin's words, they also knew that they were right. The main problem still lay with Qin Huaning. "Sister Yi, later on, go to Snow Pear Courtyard for me and deliver the fox pelt to Sister Hui. Just treat it as going to see her on my behalf. As for her mistakes, I'll properly educate her later." Qin Yining nodded obediently, yes. Seeing her so obedient, the Sun clan felt a rare warmth in their hearts. They pulled Qin Yining's hand and patted it. "I know you're a good child. In the future, I'll still dote on you. I also hope that our eldest branch will be more harmonious. Don't let outsiders see us as a joke. You're the legitimate daughter and you're sensible, so you should be more tolerant. People say that suffering a loss is a blessing. If you give in to her, isn't that also a blessing for you? Mother is right." Even though Qin Yining's heart was full of grievances, she didn't want to go against the Sun clan's wishes. If it was someone else, she would have already questioned, why should a sensible person be more tolerant? Shouldn't a sensible person be doted on a bit more? Since suffering a loss is a blessing, why aren't you willing to suffer a loss? But facing the Sun clan, she knew that she wouldn't be able to reason clearly. Instead, it would only cause her mother to be even more confused. She didn't want the mother-daughter relationship that she had painstakingly built up to be strained because of these matters. Qin Yining's attitude towards the Sun clan could be summed up in a few words: have a big heart, have thick skin, be obedient, and have a sweet mouth. "Mother, don't worry. I'll bring the fox pelt to see Miss Huining later. The glutinous bean paste filling that we just ate also tasted pretty good. Mother Jean, do you have any more in the kitchen? I'll bring some for Miss Huining as well. Mother Jean thought to herself that this was what it meant to know how to conduct oneself. She smiled and said, "There's more. This old servant will pass down the order. Bring a few more things for Miss Huining." "Thank you for your trouble, Mother Jean." Qin Yining took the beauty hammer and changed it to massaging the Sun Clan's legs. Mother Jean went outside to prepare the food boxes with Kaiju. Just as the two of them were about to enter the room to reply, they saw Song Lan and Bing Tang, who were always by Qin Yining's side, walking over with a hand warmer, a thick woolen cloak with large sleeves, and 2 umbrellas. "Mother Jean, Sister Kaiju." Song Lan smiled and bowed. Bing Tang also followed suit and bowed. "Oh, we don't deserve this." Mother Jean and Kaiju both knew the origins of Bing Tang, so how could they dare to accept her bow? They hurriedly moved to the side to avoid her and bowed instead. After being polite for a while, Bing Tang smiled and said, "When I looked at the sky, I felt that it wasn't good. It looked like it was going to rain and snow. We were worried that Miss would catch a cold, so we brought something to wait for Miss to come." Mother Jean and Kaiju subconsciously looked at the sky. Although it wasn't cloudless for thousands of miles, there were only a few extra clouds. How was it possible that it would rain and snow? They just took it as an excuse for the two of them to come and pick up Qin Yining. "Miss Bing Tang is very considerate. Come in and warm up." Mother Jean led the two of them into the room and warmed them up by the fire in the outer room. She then carried the food boxes into the inner room. Qin Yining was currently discussing with the Sun Clan how to use his fox pelt. "Why don't I not put mine on the cloak and just make it into a scarf? This way, I can wear it no matter what I wear." "That's good. Your maternal grandmother also gave me a sable pelt. Why don't we find someone to make it into a scarf? The remaining edges can be made into a sleeping rabbit. It'll be warm and beautiful to wear." Qin Yining nodded repeatedly and smiled. Mother is still the most knowledgeable. This is even better. I don't know what Miss Huining wants to do with her pelt. Why don't we ask her? You can ask her when you go later. This servant will go and inform our young lady. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. In fact, she had already caught a glimpse of Qin Huining's figure from the corner of her eye. She only heard her say in a suppressed voice, "I don't want the things. Tell her to get out." The head maidservant, Fugue, came in with a tray of tea. When she heard this, her expression froze. She looked at Qin Yining nervously. When she saw that there was nothing strange about her, she squeezed out a smile and said loudly, "Fourth young lady, please have some tea."